Hi everyone, we're back.
Hello.
We're doing this thing. Samuel, how's it feel to be in the observer seat this time?
I feel sober and I'm very happy.
You gotta change that. This can't stay.
Back to drunk and depressed I go.
All right, so today we are talking about a very important game, a game that I think has touched the lives of many, and that game is going to be.
Okay. All right, buddy.
Maybe it's touched them a little inappropriately, but we'll see. We were talking about
It's a video game.
we were talking about Breath of the Wild here today. The reason that I'm talking about Breath of the Wild, Caroline posed the question earlier: why not talk about Hollow Knight? Because we would be here all day. I could talk about Hollow Knight to my death and back again, and I feel like I have to some degree. And there's already a playthrough up on my channel, so I wanted to talk about something else. Because
link in his own videos already.
Go ahead and leave a comment, like, and subscribe down below.
Video will be linked in the top right corner.
I'm skipping straight to the 94 proof. I'm done.
Okay, why Breath of the Wild? Because I have opinions, and they need to be heard, and they need to not be boiled down to simply Colin hates Breath of the Wild. That is not true. This is defamation, and I will not stand for it. I will not stand for this libel.
Colin, you are heard and you are valid.
You will not be silenced.
I will preface this by saying I guarantee this almost will not be nearly as well structured as Sam's review on Elden Ring was. I kind of cobbled this together throughout the day, whereas he was holding on to that for a couple months. So we're gonna see how this goes. But hey, I have 5.5 years of this game. Wow, exactly 5.5 years. That's crazy. To back it up. Okay. Background. We gotta start from the top. So, the thing about Breath of the Wild is that it took a long time for people to get it. It took a long time for there to be another mainline console Zelda game. The last one before Breath of the Wild was Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword in 2011. That's like 6 years. That's 6 years of people waiting for another mainline Zelda game. Granted, we got Link Between Worlds in there. We got like Triforce Heroes and stuff on both on the 3DS. That's fine. They're fun games. But you know how Nintendo fans are. If it ain't Metroid Prime 4, it's not a Metroid game, you know? And so Breath of the Wild coming out, finally being announced in like fucking 2015 or whatever. Revelation. People were ecstatic. People were excited to see what would come. Even though the very first thing we got for like a full year was like a still image of Link on a horse looking over a field. That was it. That's all we had for 2 years, and like Nintendo fans ate it up because that's what we do. Eventually, we get to, I believe it's October of 2016, and Nintendo is ready to reveal their next console, the next generation, the next revelation of video game consoles. And they show us the Nintendo Switch. Oh my god, it's portable. Oh my god, it has controllers built into it. Little did we know, those controllers would suck. But that's not what mattered, because we got a glimpse of the next Zelda game in action. And people were excited. The game was scheduled for March 3rd of 2017. And about a month beforehand, we got a very epic trailer that I will actually reference at a later point in this presentation. And eventually, we did get Breath of the Wild to release. So, 6 years later, we finally get a new mainline Zelda game. And they did something really, really smart. They knew that their consumers would not all have a Nintendo Switch. They would not all get it on launch day when this game came out. And so they actually also released a copy or a version for the Wii U, which is a notoriously bad-selling console. However, it worked out really well for them because in that first year, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sold more copies than Switches were sold. I believe it was like 3 million copies of Breath of the Wild were sold in its first year, and the Switch sold around 2 million within its first year. So putting it on the Wii U actually turned out to be a bit of a smart play for them. And let's just say that the hype was real. I mean, to this day, you still have people talking about Breath of the Wild. everyone here has played Breath of the Wild, I'm pretty sure. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
Yeah. And I'm sure we all have varying opinions on it. Actually, I'm curious about that. I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Real quick, sentence summary. Everyone give me your opinion on Breath of the Wild. We'll start with Caroline.
Extremely enjoyable game, but probably not in my top 5.
Okay. Roan.
Excellent, enjoyable game. Very, perhaps overhyped.
Interesting that you say that. We'll come back to that. Sam.
Commit, bro.
Best lo-fi open world. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Did you say lo-fi?
Yeah, yeah, lo-fi open world. Yeah. I fuck with that. I fuck with that response, actually.
So,
Yeah.
across the board, I'm pretty positive. Actually, real quick, we're going to head over Metacritic. What's Metacritic got for us? So, the Metascore for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is 97 out of 100, which is obscenely high. It is listed as a Metacritic must play. If you scroll down to the individual reviews, it's literally 100, 10 out of 10, 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 100, 10 out of 10. And then Elden Ring 3106 said this was kind of boring and gave it a 0. But we're going to ignore him. Basically, the point being that, like I said, the hype was real for this game. People were raving for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I was one of those people. I was so stoked to get my hands on a new Zelda game. For many years. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was my favorite video game of all time until it was surpassed by Persona 5 and then shortly after passed by Hollow Knight. So it's still in the top 3, which is pretty impressive. Breath of the Wild did not overtake it, and I will explain why in some time. So what made Breath of the Wild special? One, the big one, duh. It's an open world game. No other Zelda game is quite fully open world. Games like Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess have kind of like sandboxy areas, like wide open areas to explore that may be interconnected. Maybe they're separated off into different worlds and stuff, but none quite as open world as Breath of the Wild. I don't know about you guys. I feel like Breath of the Wild is the most open world game. I feel like that's a good assessment to make.
Yeah, I agree with that statement.
Yeah,
We're going to come back to that.
Like, you know, Todd Howard can be like, you see that mountain? You can go there. And you can't because he's fucking Todd Howard and he's a snake oil seller. And
But his leather jacket, though.
It's not snake oil if it works.
It's not snake oil if it works. But it worked for Shigeru Miyamoto and Nintendo. And they're like, hey, that mountain, you can like actually go there. And so that was a huge draw for a lot of people, that this world was so incredibly massive. And it kind of set the bar for what an open world game should be. Growing along with it being open world, it is very open. It encourages your choice. It basically gives you your tutorial area, and then right after that, it says, okay, here is the world, bye. And then that's all you have. You just work with that and you move out from there, which is really cool. I am not the biggest open world game fan. Excuse me. There are a couple instances of games that really hit for me. So like the Horizon series I'm really into for open world games. But I mean, you can ask most people in this chat. I don't tend to finish open world games. I played The Witcher 3 for like 2 hours. I bought Cyberpunk, never played it. Just like, it's an ongoing list for me of open world games that I say I'll go back to one day and never really do. Breath of the Wild is one that I stuck through, and I think that ability to have that open choice to do whatever you want, to restart the game and just go in a completely different direction, you can do that. That is completely viable, and I think that's the appeal for a lot of people as well. However, in tandem with this, there's not a lot of direction within the game. It starts you off really well by saying, okay, you do the Great Plateau, and then you head off to Kakariko Village and talk to Impa. And then from there, it kind of mainly directs you to Vah Ruta. And then from there, it's just like, okay, we're literally done helping you find anything. It is up to you now. Which for a lot of people is really cool. For me, I mean, it's kind of hit or miss. I think that you can have a little bit more direction in your game. I mean, Breath of the Wild nails it pretty well. That it says, okay, go take on the Divine Beasts, and then you go to Hyrule Castle. That's really all you're heading for. Anything in between is kind of what the game is leaving open for you to explore. I do think that just kind of dropping players off doesn't really fit my preferred game style, but I see why it works for so many people. Another thing that separates this game from other Zelda games is a lot, but one that really stuck out for me is fewer key items. So the staple for Zelda games from Zelda 1 onward is that you follow a routine. You get into this same sort of style of go to an area, find the dungeon, beat the boss with like an item you find in the dungeon. And that item is usually pretty neat and unique, and you can use it to open up ways to explore in the overworld. So that's the bow and arrow, the boomerang, the hook shot, stuff like that. That's one of the reasons that
You listed the most common one.
I literally did. I was about to go into that. Why Twilight Princess is one of my favorite Zelda games is because it takes that same formula, and anyone who has played Twilight Princess can tell you it is a ripoff of Ocarina of Time through and through. However, it does a very good job of adding new, fresh things into the style of Ocarina of Time. So the key items are a very key part of that. What other fucking Zelda game has the spinner? Hyrule Warriors, technically, but you have to have an amiibo for that.
That thing is broken in the Hyrule Warriors meta.
So there's the spinner. You have the Dominion Rod, which is mostly useless, but like still a cool, unique item. The ball and chain, just like swinging around a giant flail. That's ridiculous. I love it. That is something that I really loved about Zelda games, is just being able to go into different dungeons, going into different areas, and finding these new weapons that would unlock stuff in the overworld. Breath of the Wild doesn't do that, like at all, pretty much. You have the Sheikah Slate upgrades, but you're literally given all of them at the very beginning of the game. The only extra one that you unlock is the camera, I'm pretty sure, which doesn't affect actual gameplay too much. You can upgrade your Sheikah Slate abilities like the bombs and magnesis and stuff like that. But for the most part, there's not any form of key item. The boomerang and bow and arrow have just been delegated to regular weapons that you can just pick up in the overworld from random enemies. And that's fine. I know that you're focusing on creating a new style of Zelda game. It's a new type of world, and you're not going to be able to carry over every element of them. But I think that the key items were something that made Zelda Zelda, gave it like its own kind of unique feel, and inspired a lot of other games to kind of replicate that. And so to take that away feels almost, to me, disingenuous to what the series is kind of representative of. I think that Breath of the Wild, the game that we have now, I don't think it would have worked really well with key items like the hook shot or trying to think of like some other basic, like the feather boots and stuff, like iron boots, stuff like that. It don't really fit into the world of Breath of the Wild, but I feel like losing those things, it just does kind of feel like I play through the game and I'm missing that kind of element there. The key items are also just presented differently. You just have them all, like I said, from the very beginning, the bombs, bow and arrows pretty much. And it feels like they start you off with a lot more than you have in other Zelda games. Other Zelda games, you have this kind of continuous growth throughout the game. Like, oh, okay, I got the bow and arrow, so now I'm better at fighting enemies at long distance. And you can see that from even item to item. You know, you get the boomerang in the first dungeon. Yeah, that can stun enemies farther away, but it only briefly disables them. Then you get the bow and arrow later on, and now you can kill enemies that are farther away. So you see that direct progression. Breath of the Wild kind of loses that element of it when it comes to its items, but it makes up for it in other parts that I'll get to later. Breath of the Wild is beloved to this day. People still play this game. People still find mods for this game. There's multiplayer mods. There's bingo challenges. There's so much that you can do with Breath of the Wild that a lot of people are still playing with. Speedrunning for this game is very, very big. I don't know for certain, but I feel like it's one of the more popular Nintendo speedrunning games. Like, obviously, it's not quite on the level of Mario 64, but I feel like I see Breath of the Wild speedruns a lot. People loved how new ideas were mixing with kind of the classic icons and systems that that Zelda had for a long time. That, you had your standard characters like Link, Zelda, Impa, etc., and you could see them in kind of this new, fresh world and get a new perspective on it. And the reason that people will say that Colin does not like Breath of the Wild is because I did not like this part. I'm a hater. I did not like this part of Breath of the Wild. I did not really connect with how distinct it felt from the rest of the series. And I hope that the rest of this review will kind of get into why on a better scale.
Speedrun.com is not maybe the best resource, but there are just about 6,000 runs on Breath of the Wild, and I'm looking at the platform for Switch, sorting by most runs. Mm-hmm. There are 15 games with more speedruns than Breath of the Wild.
Considering the number of games on Switch, that's very high.
Hella impressive.
It's like, okay, we exaggerate saying it the highest. Like, yes, Mario Odyssey beats it out, and Super Mario 64 does, but like, it's pretty high up there. And in terms of Zelda franchises, Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past beat it out, but they've also been out longer.
Exactly, yeah. And I can easily see people doing speedruns of Breath of the Wild for many years to come. Well, I shouldn't say that because... Yeah, I shouldn't say that because when Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, everyone's going to forget about this game. But
damn.
If Link to the Past is so great, how come we never had Link to the Past 2?
It's called A Link Between Worlds, you asshole.
Nah, ain't never heard of it.
Best 2D Zelda game, by the way. That's a rant for a different day. Any questions after the introduction is now over?
I actually have a couple, but I think it's better to ask them in the sections that I guess they'll be talked about in, which I feel they will be. So
okay,
I'll hold them off for now.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, another question. Are we for the duration of this for this presentation? Are we allowed to call you a hater?
You are allowed to call me a hater even after this presentation is over, if you so wish.
I bet.
Again, I do want to clarify, I do not hate Breath of the Wild. There are many things I dislike about this game. However, I fully understand how valuable and cherished this game is, and the many, like, beyond count great things that this game has for it. And I'm going to get into both sides of that, hopefully.
Okay.
No,
TLDR, Colin. TLDR, Colin. I need to know. Is this better than Skyward Sword? Go ahead, Colin. Go ahead, Colin.
It's better than Skyward Sword.
That's what I thought.
Okay. If no questions there, let's get into just the nitty-gritty basics, performance. And I think that the first most obvious thing to start with when it comes to performance is the art style of this game. The reason I say we start there, I don't think anyone could say anything bad against it. There are like some graphical and maybe mechanical limitations that the Switch has, but the way the style, the art design of this game, beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous through and through, beginning to end. I'll admit, like many, I was very hesitant on it at first. The weird kind of hybrid between standard and cel shaded animation was a little bit weird to get used to, but when you actually play the game, I don't think that any other art style would have fit it better.
Here's, bro. I'll drink to that.
Yeah. It's... I mean, imagine going out, you leave that Shrine of Resurrection and you walk out onto that ledge and see Hyrule in front of you. You have that image ingrained into your mind in the art style that is in. If it were Twilight Princess, that would look chunky as fuck and horrible. If it were Skyward Sword, it would have been washed out because of like the watercolor aspect and stuff like that. So they really found a art style that I think perfectly fit with this game, and I'm excited to see that even grow more with the sequel. So getting that out of the way, at launch, if you played this game at launch, it was not the best end sentence. Because, I mean, the Nintendo Switch had just come out. There were obviously limitations with that hardware, and still are to this day. Not to say that it looked bad by any means, but even when you play it on a high definition TV, you can still see kind of like some cracks in the performance, in the what's the word I'm looking for? Just like the
frame rate,
the graphics, the aesthetic, stuff like that. There are some things that kind of seep through with Breath of the Wild. I don't think it looks as good as a game like Mario Odyssey, but then again, the art style kind of contributes to that to some degree because it's not as straight-laced as the art style of Mario Odyssey or other games on the Switch. This was quickly, very soon after release, patched, and the game performs a lot better. Initially, it was kind of buggy. It would have a lot of pop-in or slowdown, and I think the game today has very minimal of that, if even at all for some people. As long as you're playing on a TV. In handheld, they're still there. But that's
this reminded me of the forest, like the Master Sword forest.
Oh my god. Yeah, the Lost Woods.
Oh man, that place was egregious pre-patches.
Yeah. Sorry, took another shot. Whew. Even after the patches, thank you. Even after the patches, the Lost Woods is bad. Basically, when you go there, you have to look at like what's his name? Ketsu, something. The Maraca dude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you have to look at him because like he's like, if you focus on him, it doesn't load the other things, and so the game looks fine. If you move anywhere else in the Lost Woods area, total frame rate crash. But yeah, so not flawless, but they were working with what they had, and they strive to create a massive open world game. You're gonna have some slowdown. You're gonna have some lag. I mean, even on like PS5, Horizon Forbidden West had pop-in and stuff at the early parts, so no game is gonna be flawless there. Overall, the performance of the game, I think, is very well done. There's never really an instance where a game is going to lag so bad that it's going to throw you off in combat. It's never going to cut you out or freeze you to a point where you miss a jump that you were trying to make or something like that. Overall, I think that it is not perfect, but it works very, very well. If you play the game, you're, for the most part, not going to have any major issues with it. Now we're moving on to the biggest section.
Yeah.
You have a question, or are you?
No. I was just like, oh, he's gonna go into the next part of performance, and then he left.
Well, I do have the inquiry because you, probably all three of you are more tech savvy in general than I am.
That is a lie. On my part, at least.
Samuel, you work with computers. Anything you have to add to performance?
I mean, I can go into what they revealed about like their engines and stuff, and how they had to like change it up from. Apparently, it's like from the ground up. They had to make the reason why they delayed it. Like, you remember that big delay that they did? Like, they announced the game and they had it running on the Wii U.
It was for like fall 2016, or I think like summer 2016 maybe, and then they pushed it back to spring 2017.
Yeah, but like up until then, all we had was that like one weird trailer where you just showed Link walking around.
Yeah.
Like a magic meter. So apparently, the reason why they did the delay was because after that demo, apparently they unearthed a bunch of stuff about the new engine that they had to write from the ground up. There's a bunch of issues that they didn't realize they had, so they had to rework them entirely. It's that same, but I guess it paid off because now they're using that engine for this game, the next game, and also Hyrule Warriors, the Breath of the Wild one.
Age of Calamity.
Yeah, that one uses the same engine as that game, which apparently was also why it had so much frame rate issues with so many characters on screen. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, making a Dynasty Warriors game with this engine was not the smartest move Nintendo ever made. But
I get why they wanted to do it, but
I don't.
My God,
Spoilers for later. We will actually be talking about Age of Calamity at some point. But we'll hold off on that.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents in before I go on an hour-long rant.
Yeah, so, perks of the Switch. I literally have it in my hands right now, and I'm playing Breath of the Wild, and, it runs just fine. I don't have any lags or hiccups traveling through Gerudo Desert. Granted, there's nothing here. It's a desert, but this is what most of your gameplay experience is going to be like, so you don't... If you're one of those like super nitpicky people about graphics and capabilities and such, you're not going to have too much to worry about with Breath of the Wild. Oh, I almost died. Anyway, so the biggest section, which has a lot of smaller subsections within it that I'm going into, is mechanics. The reason this is the biggest section is because there are a lot of mechanics in this game, and I have a lot of opinions about them. And the very first one that we're going to start with, I think, is the one that is the central tenet of Breath of the Wild, which is exploration and, by extension, movement. Exploration in this game is very, very good. Like I said, it kind of just drops you off. You have your tutorial area on the Great Plateau, and then you get dropped off, and the world is yours to explore. It is all there. If you want to go to Death Mountain right away and hop into a volcano, you can do that. If you want to go and get sucked up in a sandstorm in Gerudo Desert, you can go there right away. Like, the fact that no area of this game is locked off to you from basically the outset of the game is... no word describes it except for amazing. Even in games before for open world that, technically you could go anywhere, you're going to get somewhere and it's going to say, oh, you need the Thieves Guild key to enter this part of the city, or you're going to need this special book of the demon lords to access this area of the world. Breath of the Wild does not have that. Sure, you're going to need to do puzzles here and there to unlock shrines and stuff like that, but ultimately, the world is open. That's why it fits that description, like I said earlier. It is the most open world game. And it's commendable, really. And the way that you explore that world is where the first hang-up for me kind of comes in. I know I just got off praising it a lot for its exploration, but the exploration also has a couple hiccups. Walking with a stamina meter. Okay, we're going to talk about stamina meters in Breath of the Wild. We're going to talk about stamina meters in general. They're dumb. I hate them. Video games are a way to, kind of put yourself in a world that you could not have otherwise. Why am I limited by my ability to run without breaking into a panting cold sweat? Yakuza has this, and I hate it. Just let me run around the city. The city is 5 meters wide, dude. Why can't I just run across the city? Breath of the Wild obviously has this. You get to upgrade your stamina meter, and every time you upgrade it, it's still not enough. I'm just not a fan of it. And when you have an open world game like this, something like Yakuza, you could say it's open world, but it's open city. You explore one area, right? And you typically don't have to get very far. If I want to travel without using fast travel, mind you, from Hateno Village to Rito Village, dog, you're going to be walking for a good long while. Or you could hop on a horse, which is cool. You can't get Epona unless you have an Amiibo. That's kind of fucked up. What the hell's that all about?
What?
Epona. So, I know that Rohan hasn't really delved into it too much. I don't know about you, Caroline. If you have not played other games in the Zelda series,
Never.
Yeah. Link
on the Nintendo 64 when I was like 6.
Yeah. So in like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, like a bunch of the mainline Zelda games, you have a horse that is Link's, like belongs to Link, and that horse's name is Epona. She is a very good girl. She is not in this game unless you buy a $20 little figurine.
Ain't that just the way?
Ain't that just the way? Granted, you can get literally any horse you want in the overworld, but darn it, they're just never where you want them to be. They're just kind of in their own preset areas, and odds are that you're going to tame a horse, and it's going to have shit stats, and you're just going to have to deal with that. Even the horses have stamina meters, but I think that's kind of been standard for even Epona throughout the series. Yeah.
Still waiting for my Skyloft bird in Breath of the Wild. Also, there is always the option for like, what was it? It was Ganon's horse and I believe Zelda's horse.
Yeah,
but
right.
both
Zelda's
of them
horse, sorry,
they're great
Zelda's
stats.
horse, you don't need a DLC. Epona, you got to buy something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think for Zelda's horse, because there's that area with a horse statue that you can find. The white horse that's Zelda. So it's probably the best horse you can find in the standard issue game without a DLC.
Right.
I preferred Ganon's horse because it was just massive as fuck. It was just big.
Yeah.
You needed a DLC for that.
No, you can find it in the overworld. It's just
nice.
really big.
The annoying thing is that they're the best stats in the game, and they are in the most inconvenient locations.
Yeah, Ganon's horse is literally in a canyon behind the tutorial area. Like,
Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah. So yes, you have those options for horses. They're typically not going to be your defaults. Like you'll eventually get there, but like I said, when you get dropped off after going to Kakariko Village, you're kind of left to go on your own. This game does do one really amazing, or two, important to say two really amazing things with movement. The first one, and probably the one that most comes to mind, is the paraglider. This was so good that literally every open world game that came after 2017 copied it and did it without remorse. Horizon Forbidden West has this. I know that, what was that other game that came out recently? Genshin, yeah, that's not recent, but yeah, Genshin also copied it.
I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, the paraglider is amazing. Just being able to save yourself from falling off of massive heights, which technically I guess should be snapping Link's elbows and shoulders, but it's fine. Being able to just glide seamlessly across the land is very, very nice. Can also honestly just be like a calming experience. I've genuinely just had moments where, if I need to respond to a text or want to get a snack or something, I will just get to the top of like a ledge where I am, and I'll just start gliding in the direction I want to go. I literally just hold the button in the joystick in the direction I want to go, and I just do what I need to do. It's simple. It doesn't require any effort, and it's just nice to kind of glide through, see the environments.
If we can add, any speedrunner, it's kind of opened a whole world for a speedrunner. I think it's one of the reasons that speedruns for this game are so popular, where you combine the bomb mechanics or other mechanics with the paraglider and cross massive distances.
Absolutely.
Easily. Without it, I don't think that speedruns would be nearly as popular for this game.
Yeah. I forget the specific term. I think it's like bomb skipping or bomb jumping or something like that. But yeah, you just basically blow yourself up and then go into the pause menu and then activate your paraglider from there. And it just triggers it so you can just soar across the land. And I've done it before. It's not that hard to pull off. So technically anybody could do that just to get across massive distances pretty quickly. The other really cool thing that this game does is land-based. So you have air-based movement and land-based movement. Shield surfing. You don't use it that often, really. If you have a big downhill slope, that's pretty much the only time. But shield surfing is really, really fun. I wish it didn't wear out the durability of your shield, but it makes sense that it does. And just being able to kind of just cruise through a valley or something like that is so satisfying. I was doing it earlier today as I was playing through to try and, remind myself of all that this game has, just like surfing the dunes of Gerudo Desert. It's just really, really fun. And I think that's the most important part of movement in a video game, is that you make it fun. I think that one of the biggest things that can hold a video game back is if movement feels clunky and slow. Like, how many first-person or even third-person games have you played where you're just kind of like trudging through an area and you're just walking, and it doesn't feel like you're really going anywhere. It just feels like you're going through the motions of how to walk. You're not really doing anything with it. I'm sorry to insult your child, Samuel, but The Witcher 3 movement in that game is awful.
I was literally about to say it, Colin. I was like, yo, Witcher 3's movement's some ass.
If you have not played The Witcher 3, I'm not going to say don't. There's lots of great things about it. Movement ain't one of them.
Movement is not.
Like,
literally,
whether you're
a mini game better than their movement.
Whether you're in the overworld, riding a horse, or in combat, you cannot move in the way that you want to, no matter how hard you try.
It's so annoying.
I would say it was funny to hear you rant about the stamina, because the issue you have with stamina is what I have with durability in this game.
We're gonna get there, I promise. I have things to say. Yeah.
Can I?
Yes.
No. Is it question time or wait?
You can ask a question anytime you want.
Are you going to talk about completion in this game?
I will, lightly, because I've not completed it like 100% for obvious reasons that I will talk about when we get there.
No problem. I would love it. I would love that. About it.
I do hate, continuing off the stamina meter thing, I do hate that the paraglider kind of has to come with that. It makes sense in the world that they've created that you would need stamina to be able to hang on to a paraglider for that long. That's like the one thing that kind of interrupts like the flow of your movement, is when you run out of stamina on your paraglider and you kind of have to make a quick like crash landing somewhere. But for the most part, movement in this game is typically very fun. It can just kind of take a little bit to get into. All right. We're going to talk about how this game is structured and what that means for the progression of the game. And I think this is where many of my qualms fit into my opinions on Breath of the Wild. So the structure is simple. You wake up, you do the tutorial area, you get the paraglider, you leave the plateau, and then, like I said, the world is open and you're given your main task. Your main task, go kill Ganon. That's literally all you gotta do. And you can do that, like instantly. As soon as you leave the Great Plateau, you can go to Hyrule Castle. You'll probably die a lot if you're not experienced with the game, but you can go there, you can fight Ganon, and you can beat the game. I don't know what the record is off the top of my head. Rohan, do you still have speedrun.com open?
Looks like... Give me a little bit of time while you guys continue discussing.
Okay.
Alright, but...
I took another shot, so...
Oh, God, dude. Hey, chill. Careful now. Now I kind of want water.
Get discussion, bro.
I'm there. I can read.
I should say any percent or like 100%. What are we looking at?
Any percent.
Any percent, got it.
Yeah.
100% has to be like 10+ hours.
Yeah, it's not. It is not quick.
Yeah.
15 hours at the top. 15 hours and 52 minutes, actually.
Jeez Louise.
Jeez.
I cannot play a game for 16 hours straight. That's horrible. That element of being able to just go right to the final boss, beat it, win the game, really, really cool. I think that's inherently really neat. I think it's semi-unique to Breath of the Wild. I know some other games have done it before and since, but I think people most associate that aspect of a game, of just kind of being able to start it, go to the end, and beat it if you are skilled enough with Breath of the Wild. I think it's kind of like the de facto exemplar of that kind of structure.
Not the de facto exemplar.
The de facto exemplar. Yeah, that was a really pompous sentence of me. I apologize.
I liked it. It had a real rhythm to it.
You can do other things, and the game encourages you to. You can do other things to make it so that the fight against Ganon is easier. You can go and fix what's wrong with the 4 divine beasts scattered in pretty much the 4 corners of the world. Each represented by a different race of the world, the Zora, the Gorons, the Rito, and the Gerudo. And by doing that, you are able to go to Hyrule Castle, and Ganon is going to be weaker, so it's easier to take him down. If you have not gone to Hyrule Castle without taking down the divine beasts, you actually have to fight all of the major bosses of the game in Hyrule Castle and then fight Ganon, so it's like an extra hurdle. But if you take down the divine beasts, you get rid of those bosses, and then Ganon himself is cut down to, I believe, half health. So the game very heavily incentivizes you to go explore the world and go take on these challenges. So that structure is really, really nice for an open world game. Being able to go from place to place and make it so that the end game is ultimately easier. This does not tie into the progression whatsoever, because I think that Breath of the Wild does not have progression. I was thinking about it earlier today, and I think that this game, at least for me, again, this is just my opinion, all of this, I think for me, Breath of the Wild would have felt stronger as a game and felt stronger in terms of progression if it had some sort of experience related to your progress. So, you know, you get experience for killing enemies, you get experience for taking down bosses or completing side quests, stuff like that. And that experience in turn making you stronger to some degree. I think as it stands, it's very lopsided in Breath of the Wild. And we'll get to weapons and weapon durability in a little bit, but basically what it comes down to is you found a chest and it has a weapon that does 60 damage in it, and you haven't even gone to your first dungeon yet, you're suddenly very, very overpowered. You get to Hyrule Castle and all you have are, you know, wooden spoons. That's tough, man. You're gonna get fucked. That's pretty much the way that this open world is structured. And it works in the structure of the story and the world, but when it comes to feeling like you're making any progress, it's hard to feel like it's connected. It's hard to feel like it meshes together. In that you can go to the Divine Beast in any order. It's not really going to change how strong you are. You can go to here, there, and anywhere, and it might make you stronger. It might give you the same shit you already have. That's what a lot of people like about the game, is that you are able to find so many different things. You're able to explore so many different areas, and people will tell you there's always something there. I think that's bullshit. I think finding a single treasure chest with 200 rupees in it, that doesn't constitute something being there. That feels like a cheap cop-out to me, but we're gonna get more into that later. So I think progress is really just held back by the way that this world is structured in its storytelling. In something like, the example I'm going to use most is Twilight Princess, because that's the Zelda game I'm most familiar with. You start out as like this village farm boy with a wooden sword and shield. And then as time progresses, you unlock your key items like the boomerang and bow and arrow. Eventually you get a regular sword that does more damage than your wooden one. And then eventually you get the master sword. And you just get constant upgrades and progress throughout the game. This game, you can get the master sword as long as you just rack up enough hearts. But getting hearts in this game isn't tied to anything except shrine side quests, which can be something as simple as solving a simple puzzle or, just defeating one lone mini guardian in a room. As long as you do enough of those, you can get the master sword right away. And like I said, there's just kind of that disconnect, and it doesn't really feel like the game carries any progress along with it. I know I just talked for like 10 minutes on end. At least it felt that way. I'm like several shots in at this point.
That's literally the point of this, Colin.
Yeah, you're doing fine. You should get some water if you need to. Like,
I'm drinking water. I'm drinking plenty of water.
Yeah.
I have my pretzels as well, so I'm absorbing that alcohol.
Actually, funny you should say that. I'm finished drinking this like second Truly, and I'm like, damn, I could really use a dinner right now.
Have you not eaten dinner? Okay.
No.
He eats dinner at black people dinner time.
Yeah.
What?
I think this is international dinner time, Colin. I think the U.S. is just the exception and not the norm. I'm gonna be real.
Hey, remind me to cut that comment out of the final video.
Nah. Keep it in. We real here.
If you're comfortable enough to say it in private, you should be comfy enough to say it in public.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, hey, that's Samuel's own word for it. So.
It is. Except I usually say foreigner, but I don't even say foreigner. It's just non-white people time.
Non-white people time, yeah.
What is that?
10 o'clock.
Literally anything later than 6.
Yeah, my family goes for I think like near 6:37. The concept of eating dinner at 5 is absurd to me.
Yeah, that's insane.
I don't eat dinner at 5. I did that during freshman year of college, but that was an exception.
That was big. Oh.
Anyways, where were we?
Getting dinner.
Getting water. Well, I'm gonna go through a couple more things, and then we'll have our regularly scheduled water break, so I can refill my cup. Yeah. All right, what's next on here? Oh, because I was just talking about it. Perfect timing. Perfect segue. Go me from the past for planning this. Like I said, as long as you do enough things and get enough hearts, you can get the Master Sword. Where do you get those hearts? You get them in the motherfucking shrines. Let me talk about the shrines. Putting 120 one-room mini dungeons throughout your game, not smart. Who did that? Whose bright idea was that? That was ridiculous. And I think that the part of it that pisses me off the most, because you use them to upgrade your stamina and health, right? You can go to all of them and you can get massive upgrades. It's very helpful. It's very beneficial. The part that pisses me off the most is that, at least in the base game of Breath of the Wild, prior to the DLC, there's not enough to fully upgrade both. You have to choose to either fully upgrade your stamina or fully upgrade your health. You cannot do both. That was an insult to me as someone with very mild OCD. I was like, how dare you leave me with 2 3/4 of a stamina bar? That is an insult to my character, sir, and I absolutely will not stand for it. They did add DLC, which added a couple more shrines, I believe. So I think that you can fully max out both now. But like, what the fuck, dude? How fucking dare you? The shrines themselves, they're fine. You know, there are some that are somewhat memorable. There are some that are kind of fun. But like, they don't make up for the loss of main game Zelda dungeons. If you haven't played many of the Zelda games, if Breath of the Wild is your only Zelda game, then you don't know that the dungeons in Legend of Zelda are one of their defining features. again, I'm going back to Twilight Princess because I think it has some of the best examples of this. In Breath of the Wild, your dungeons are brown, gray, mechanical animal, and you do that 4 times. That is it, and it's like infected with some purple goo. It's the same dungeon, you do it 4 times, and then you have your mini shrines, which are styled in pretty much the exact same way. Twilight Princess, let's just run through them. You have a forest temple built into a massive tree grown out of a forest that has been taken over by a poison, and a vile plant kind of writhes in the heart of it. And then immediately you go to a active volcano crater that people use as a mining facility. And then you go to a lakebed temple where an aquatic race has their, holy artifacts buried deep underwater. And then you go to a desert sanctuary that has skeletons and mummies writhing in the walls. I'm using the word writhe a lot. I don't know why. And it just keeps going on. They're so unique. They're so creative. And I don't know why we couldn't have something like that in Breath of the Wild. I guess maybe just like the restrictions they had with the story they were trying to tell. Yeah, the divine beasts, they're all kind of the same thing. So they're all going to kind of try and look the same. But I feel like it takes so much character away from the Legend of Zelda games to have this one core entry that so many people have played. And for many people, this is their only Zelda game. Like, Caroline is absolutely not alone in this being their only Zelda game. Many, many people have only played Breath of the Wild because they're not like super hardcore gamers, or they just don't have a lot of consoles or anything like that. And they don't know the full extent of what character that these Zelda games have. Like, Ocarina of Time, going to the bottom of like a haunted well was a dungeon in and of itself. Majora's Mask, going into a ancient temple that has a mechanic where you have to flip the entire thing upside down and go back through it in an entirely different orientation. There's so much creativity to be had there, and they tried to do some element of that with the dungeons in Breath of the Wild, where like you can move Varuta's trunk, which makes water come into the temple a little bit, or you can make it so that Varudanya, the salamander, crawls a little bit on its side so the temple turns somewhat. It's not the same though. It's not as fleshed out as other Zelda dungeons have been in the past, and I am praying hope beyond hope that if they don't change anything in Breath of the Wild 2, that at the very least that they try something with the dungeons to kind of recapture that element, because I think so much was lost for me in playing through this game and not having that experience with the dungeons. That's probably like my most passionate aspect of Breath of the Wild, is that the dungeons just deflated me. That I'm just playing through the same 4 things over and over with a slight variation. And
here.
Yeah. Yeah. I swear we'll have more positive elements in a second, but shrines and dungeons were a big aspect that I was really hung up on when I first played this game, and even now, they don't really draw me back. They're not nearly as memorable. All right. Any questions thus far? Take a little pause here.
More of a comment.
Yeah.
I left. I came back. Good news and bad news. Good news is I got some water with lime. Shout out.
Hell yeah.
Bad news is there is literally no food that I can make without cooking at 10 p.m. when my roommate is sleeping. So I'm just gonna eat this lime.
Oh, okay. That's
no. I also wanted to make a comment on I stand in a very strong agreement about the bosses. Like, I really appreciated the first boss, like the first machine. The name slipped my mind.
Varuta, water blight Ganon, I imagine.
No. Just the general name for the machines.
Oh, okay, yeah, the divine beasts.
The divine beasts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys. The first one was really fun, right? And it just so happened the order I was in, it was the water one, like most. And I thought it was really cool and innovative. And then the second one, I was like, oh, okay. And by the third one, I got annoyed. It was kind of frustrating that, like, even the way the cutscenes themselves are structured are so samey. Like, everything's the same. It's the same order for everything.
And like, to a degree, you have to do that because of the open world structure, like the vast openness that this game has. Like, you don't have to go to Varuta first. Most people will, because that's kind of where the game pushes you. But if you go to Vom Meadow, like the bird, you know, you need to get that same experience. They can't throw you in and say, okay, this is dungeon 3, because it might be your dungeon 1, it might be your dungeon 4, and they don't really know. So,
like, I feel like still, even then, there's like, like, a change in the structure of the dungeon itself, or the structure of even the animations or the storytelling, shouldn't, like, if it's changed, it shouldn't affect the ability to complete the dungeon as a standalone if it was your first time. Like, you can go to the island where they, like, strip you of all your stuff early, like really early, and I think I got it like halfway through the game as opposed to like at the end of the game, and it was still like a fun experience, you know. So,
and
I think you're correct, but there's an extent, you know. There's like an extent of things you can do to change it up.
Yeah, exactly. Eventide Island, I'm already slurring my words, is a pinnacle example in this game. I think a lot of people remember their experience going to that island. For clarification, this is the one that you go to out in the water, and the game tells you, okay, you have to get rid of all of your items and armor and weapons and everything and start from scratch and figure out what to do from there. That's like, yeah, I mean, that's also a really cool element, is that there are things that people can play through all of Breath of the Wild, and there's still a lot of stuff they miss because the game is so open world. And things like Eventide Island stand out to a lot of people. You know, the first time you stumble across the, what is it, like the King of the Mountain, like that kind of secret horse area. That's really cool. But when it comes to the main structure of the game, the main way you progress by going to these dungeons, it's the same. You do the same thing over and over. And I feel like it didn't have to be that way, like you were saying, Sam, that, you know, they're all based around elements, and, you know, to one degree or another, the elements kind of fit into how you take them down so that you can actually get into them. Like, you know, Vonaboris, you need to protect yourself from the thunder to get into it. Or, you know, Varuta, you're swimming around on Sidon so that you can hit its weak points. But then once you get inside, those elements don't really play a major role. You know, you have the water maybe changing, you know, spinning a water wheel inside the device, or you have the bird kind of like tilts as it's flying so that you get access to different areas. But I mean, you could have like the water dungeon underwater and like implement some kind of swimming mechanic or something. You could have it so that when you're flying in the air, you're precariously crossing different areas that may lead to you falling to your doom, instead of, for the most part, staying inside this secure structure. And the game just doesn't do that for reasons I understand, but don't like.
I do think it's this game as the first in the open world Zelda genre, let's say, is trying to strike a balance between two forces, right? Whereas open world, some of those fights, like those Guardian dungeons, would just be out in the open,
right?
Like the Lionels, right? Like there would be no dungeon; you would just go and fight them. But in traditional Zelda sense, you need a dungeon,
Right, exactly.
And I think this game was kind of caught in between where it's like, we got to make everything a dungeon. Like all the challenges, the majority of the challenges have to be dungeons. When you're looking at them, it's like the design is not suited to be a dungeon. Like you could have just had this in the open world and just had some. I think one of my complaints with the game overall is the coming from someone who hasn't played Zelda games, or this was the first one. I tried to play Skyward Sword afterwards. I think maybe it's easier for me to say, coming from a non-Zelda background, that sometimes it's okay to just move on from the genre, or at least like some aspects of it. Like you can still have dungeons, but maybe don't try to make every key upgrade part of a dungeon.
Right.
Like maybe there are some ways to gain a heart outside of dungeons.
Right. Yeah. I 1,000% agree with that. And I think that's what you were about to say too, Sam.
No, I agree in a sense, but I actually want to go back to a comment of yours that I really like. I also immediately thought of is that a lot of times in the dungeons, I mean, other than the fact that they all visually look similar, but even you mentioned as a suggestion, there are some like stuff in the overworld of the regions that the divine beasts are in that I thought would be really killer aspects if it were put into a concept dungeon, right? Like for the bird one, having use of your paraglider and like actually using that in the dungeon because it's a flying dungeon. Right. I thought that would be pretty cool. The water one, if there was like an underwater mechanic, I thought would really lend itself well. Or for the desert one, there is like sand sailing with like the freaking walruses.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was so fun. That was the entrance part to that dungeon. Like most of them were pretty great, as you mentioned. I feel like they should have integrated that more to the actual dungeon itself. Right. Or like for the freaking volcano one, having yourself in that like full armor and balancing like moments where you need to move quickly or moments where the armor you have to put on because it's hot but it's weighing you down, right? Like stuff like that. I don't know. It feels like they realize their success with the insert water temple of every dungeon where it's like a system-wide dungeon rule, right? Of just like having like some system aspect of the dungeon change the very dungeon itself, and they made all of them that and only that. And I was like, damn, this has no character to it.
Yeah, and you can absolutely make the argument that other Zelda games falter in their dungeons in a different way, that by relying on the key item you get in it, it kind of cheapens the dungeon. You know, if you don't get the spinner in the Arbiter's Grounds in Twilight Princess, you can't do anything in that dungeon past like the second half, right? But that adds character. That adds something fresh and new to your experience playing through that game. You're not just going through a desert variant of the same temple you've gone through 3 times already. You're adding a kind of new mechanic, a new movement option that kind of freshens up your experience.
Yeah, and you brought up the number before. What is it? 108 dungeons?
120 shrines.
Is that including the DLC?
Including the DLC, it's probably more, I think.
Yeah. Point being, that's a shit ton.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And asking for, 120 or more unique designs is tough. And I think, while it's an open world game, at the same time, you don't need to necessarily go away from the dungeon concept so much that you're like, let's just not have a true dungeon. Like, I think you could have combined some of them to just be a more immersive, thematic dungeon.
I give an example of Elden Ring. That's about it.
Yeah.
I piggyback off that real quick and just say, I have like at least 90% of the achievements in Stardew Valley and Hollow Knight and like all these games that are like not open world, but like very like there are a lot of places you can go, there are a lot of different routes you can take. Like I'm a completionist at my core. I finished every single shrine in Zelda. I found a lot of those crook seeds, this and that. I opened my menu, saw my completion percentage was 20%, and closed the game and have not gone back. It's to have that many like mini dungeons and that many like
side quests
different
and
like ways that you can pivot and still not really be making that much progress is so discouraging.
right. And I think that like having like a game like Breath of the Wild, I feel like almost shouldn't even have a completion percentage tracker because everyone is going to experience this game in a different way. Some people are just going to go straight to the dungeons, do those, beat the boss, and say, cool, I beat Breath of the Wild. I'm done with it. And then some of them are going to get in and say, I'm going to literally trace every square foot of this open landscape so that I see everything that this game has to offer. And by kind of putting a tracker on it to say, oh, you've only done this much, or you have this much left to go, is like, I feel like it's stymieing what somebody might experience with the game. Obviously, it's optional to even look at the completion tracker, but it's still kind of this omnipresent thing that you have to deal with in how you go about dealing a game. Because sometimes I'm like that exactly the same. I want to see everything a game has to offer. In Breath of the Wild, I'm not going to go into every nook and cranny to find every single treasure chest that has 50 rubies in it, because fuck that bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, on that topic, right? Open world, I don't know if you were going to go into this later, so feel free to shut me up if you were. Open world games, right? The core definition is like, okay, you're not on a linear path. Like you said, you can approach each guardian independently. But there is a kind of like more colloquial definition where it's like, you know, do your choices matter in the game? Not really. Like, you can approach all four, the outcome will still be the same. Mm-hmm. Can you play the game without completing the central story? Yes, but it won't really be the most enjoyable gameplay. Like, there isn't another goal really besides beating Ganon.
Right.
So I think like some things that become fundamentally associated with open world, and this is why I say like I really enjoyed the game, but is it the best video game of all time? Is where I say it might be overrated. Is like, yes, it is an open world game in a franchise that is historically one of the greatest, and clearly is trying to remain that with trying new concepts. It's still like, you still have to play this central story. They're still trying to kind of hold on to these old concepts like we've been discussing. Like, I think there's more room to just say, let's make Link a more real character, for instance, and say like the choices you make in the game will actually matter, right? I think there's still some room left where it's like, yes, it's open world, but there's so many different versions of open world right now. Like, I don't know, like it's open world in the most basic definition of the genre.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll definitely go into what you were just talking about there with like player choice and stuff like that. I do have that on my list here, and I'm excited to get there. I'm going to go through a couple more things, and then we're going to do a water break. I'm going to shoot for like 20 minutes, water break, pee break, whatever you got to do. So until 11 o'clock, we're going to hop on to a big one for a lot of people. We're going to start talking about weapon durability and variety.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. Okay. So at its core, I do not hate weapon durability. I think that it is a means to answer a question of how do we incentivize people to try different aspects of our game, right? So if you want to make it so that people are just picking up the strongest weapon in the game right from the outset and then beating everything within an inch of its life from there on, okay, we're going to introduce weapon durability, and that's going to be how we go about doing that. So, you know, you're going to start with a weapon that's relatively weak, but then you're going to find other weapons, but oh no, those weapons that are better break, so you need to find other weapons. It encourages exploration, it encourages trying out new things. I think that is actually really, really great. there are some elements of it, of how it is applied in Breath of the Wild, that I think don't really mesh with the style they're going for. Mainly coming down to, you shouldn't have your like ultra super rare one of a kind items have any kind of durability to them, right? Like, again, I get you're trying to abide by that sort of, we don't want people just running through the game with the one item, because it's an open world game. There's a lot to explore. There's a lot to get. And we don't want people to get the Master Sword in hour 5, and then by hour 15, they've ignored every other weapon that we've thrown at them, and they don't feel satisfied by finding any new cool things. I get that. But also, like, when you get Mipha's trident, or when you get Rivali's bow and stuff like that, those are key items that are important to the characters in the story, and there's only one of them in the entire game. Why are you gonna make it that those break? That's weird. That Link would just be out here with fucking Urbosa's scimitar, and then this like prized treasured item of one of Link's closest friends from 100 years ago, he just shatters it on some random bokoblin in the overworld. That feels a little weird to me.
That's always a funny image.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, dude, the Master Sword? What? Okay. They put in a weird, like, kind of roundabout way of doing it. It's like, oh, the Master Sword has to recharge. But like, why? Why does it have to? It's a stick. It's a sharp stick. I don't know.
It runs on solar power. You don't see the solar panels on the handle.
Listen, if we're going by the Zelda timeline, like, for whatever reason, Fi just like took a weekend off in Breath of the Wild.
Bitch, stop swinging me around. I need to take 5.
Yeah, so that's my main issue with weapon durability.
There is also modern games like Monster Hunter have a mechanic where it's like a welding mechanic where you still retain the weapon, you could just fix it.
Yeah,
And I do wish, like, especially for those 4 Guardian weapons, it just feels weird, like you said, to be like, oh, this is this awesome weapon that survived this battle 100 years ago, but oops, I broke it.
Whoops, my bad, bro.
Oh, but a good thing there's this random guy on the street who, if I give a diamond to, he can make it. Sure is convenient. Wonder where you were
100 years ago. Yeah.
Right. Point being, I'm like, there are mechanics that you're not just looking at this like, Master Sword, let's put it in a different category. We can touch on that. But there are 4 weapons that you fight for and you get out of these boss battles. And there are now video games with mechanics. I said Monster Hunter before. I'll just keep saying it because I'm a few wines in and it's the only one on my mind. You can have a welding mechanic, or you can have like, go find this item, and as long as you have it, you can repair it.
Right.
If you don't want to have this cooldown self-repair mechanic like the Master Sword had, that's fine. But just so you don't have to, go give this random guy a diamond, that just seems a little bit weird from a story perspective and a gameplay perspective.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that if you're trying to do a weapon durability thing to encourage people to find more weapons and try out more things, I think you need more variety, Like I was talking about, other key items in Zelda games, like, ball and chain, spinner, obviously no other one, sand wand, I don't fucking know. But like, there needs to be a little bit more, because as it stands in Breath of the Wild, you do have like different classes of weapons. You have clubs, swords, spears, wands. Bow and arrow is kind of like its own sort of independent category. But, you're just going to find a better one, and then that one's going to break. And so by having your strongest weapon be able to break, you kind of don't want to use it. So now you're just using shittier weapons, and you're just using more and more shittier weapons. And you grow tired kind of just finding tree branches to use instead of your big strong mallet or something like that.
I had 2 points. One is directly on this, and one is maybe a bit of a transition. On durability, another thing I had a problem with was the intersection between different mechanics, where shield surfing, really fun. You know, it's you go. When I found out how to shield surf, like Breath of the Wild jumped up my ranks. Like it was so fun. Except you can do it for like 5 seconds before your common shield breaks.
Right.
And you know, for a gameplay mechanic that's so fun, I think having durability hamper it as much as it does, like, sure, you can use the Hylian shield, but if you screw up deflection, or if you screw up a shield surf, which is two of the most fun mechanics, like that durability goes away real fast. And I think that's just the instance of where it's actually hampering the gameplay. Like, yes, you want to encourage people to go find new weapons, but you can do that with a variety of stats. You know, it doesn't just have to be durability. You can have more stats for weapons. The second question that I was going to open to you guys was, and again, if you have this later on, feel free to mention it. You can't really choose a gameplay style in terms of your weapons. Like, yes, there are different weapons, but the way that they've integrated the bow, you kind of have to stop and use the bow. Like, there isn't an option. Like, there isn't really a mechanic to which you can say, oh, I'm going to main this weapon.
Right.
Like, at least not to a significant extent. You pretty much, a lot of the ways you use the weapons are pretty similar. And yes, there are different classes, but for the most part, you're just going to, it doesn't really matter what weapon you use. Like, sure, you can go, if you charge up the spear, you can stab a few times, or versus spinning with the sword, but does that really make a huge difference in terms of your gameplay? I'm just curious what you guys thought, because in my experience, it didn't.
Yeah, I think that comes from them looking at the rest of the series and saying Link is a swordsman first and foremost. You know, every other game in the series, he doesn't use any other. He uses, you know, his key items, his boomerangs, his bows, but he is a swordsman. He wields a sword. He gets the master sword. That's his thing. So he's got to have kind of this one, maybe like two-handed if it's a heavy sword, but he's got to have a stick in his hand that he swings back and forth, because that is what we have made Link in the past. Fuck, when did Zelda 1 come out? 86. So like fucking 35 years. So at this point, they're kind of stuck with that, and they can't really say, yeah, we've decided that Link uses a spear now. He is a spear guy. I don't think that Breath of the Wild necessarily needs like a quote unquote like class system or like just a preferred weapon system or anything like that. But I do agree that it kind of feels like a sort of almost disconnect between having these different weapon styles and not really being able to focus in on any of them, you know?
Right. And building on that, right? You can always have the sword be like the best weapon. Like, I'm not saying make a spear equivalent of the master sword or anything like that. I understand that in the lore and in the history, something like that has had a huge gameplay, but stick with me for a bit. Even simple sandbox games, like I'll bring up Minecraft, and I swear not for long, but there are two mechanics. There's offensive power, right? Damage you output, and then speed. And with that alone, you can have, with just two mechanics, you can have players deciding that's my weapon of choice. Like, I'd rather attack in a way that, yes, I'm slower, but I deal more damage.
Right.
And it's not like creating, like, it's not Monster Hunter or anything where it's like, okay, 10 different categories of, you know, stats that you are now trying to balance. Like, it's just two. But it's enough of a difference that, you know, someone might say this is the better weapon for me. Point being, yes, I understand the history, but now that you've opened up different, like now Link can use different weapons. You've already introduced that into the game. Right. It's not like, I don't know about previous games, but now he has the option to use a spear or a Lionel's massive broadsword. I just think that maybe there's the opportunity to have a more definitive distinction between them.
And credit where credit's due. Like, even within types of weapons in this game, there are variations. Like, you can find the same sword you have, but with like higher durability, or, you know, does more damage when thrown and stuff. But I feel like the number of times I have gotten to one of the, like, I've opened a chest and it's been like, oh, it's a Moonlight Scimitar that does, you know, it has higher durability. Okay, I already have 3 Moonlight Scimitars that have different durability. Like, why do I care at this point? There's almost too much of the same thing, where I feel like the thing they were going for was as much variety as possible. And so it's kind of weird that they ended up kind of at the other end.
I think to go off of Rohan's point is they also, and I think what is even a huger precedent is that you can completely beat the mainline story quest without the Master Sword in its entirety.
You can beat it with a stick.
Yeah. So because of that, I think if they've set the precedent that the Master Sword is no longer main story critical, you can double down more on variety of weapon types or styles.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think so. I only switched weapon styles for like their charge up attacks if I need a specific one. Otherwise, I just used whatever I had.
Yo, the spear, the rapid jab.
Yes, yes. The spear rapid jab is high tier. I personally, if they were like, yo, let's only focus on 2 different sword styles, but let's have them be very distinct. Like, basically, Ocarina of Time had, I think, what was the best one for Zelda, where it's like, if you want to use Biggoron sword, go for it. Fuck it. It's just this massive honking thing that you can just like lurch around and it works. You know? Like, it was fun. Yeah. So I think, and it can be at that level where it's like, it doesn't need to be deep. It's not Monster Hunter deep. Like, it's, Zelda is known for puzzle solving, unique items, and interactions. And I think Breath of the Wild does like amazing job at overworld item interactions with enemies. So like beating people up with a magnetic metal box or like stuff like that. So I don't think the combat itself needs to be more in depth. It just needs to feel more unique to each weapon. You know?
That's actually a perfect segue into the next thing I was going to talk about here, kind of tangential to weapons, is item and weapon interactions. I feel like we've been talking negative on like weapon durability and stuff like that for a while. This part I think is like actually almost wholly positive. The amount of like the sheer number of interactions that this game has, either with elements in the environment or between certain weapons you have and your armor or just other enemies, I think is impressive beyond belief. It is super, super cool that it sets this up right from the outset. On the Great Plateau, you have like, you know, rocks set up that you can push down a hill into explosive barrels to knock enemies out easy peasy. You have your elemental weapons. So when you're in the middle of the far north and you're freezing cold, you can literally just equip a flame blade, and having that blade equipped on your back makes you warm enough that you're not going to freeze to death. That's really neat, and I don't think I've seen something like that in any other type of game on this same level as Breath of the Wild, where, you know, simply equipping a weapon affects like the world around you. The interactions that you have in this game of, you know, being able to fly if you use magnesis on those fucking minecarts, like, that's ridiculous and definitely not developer intended, but really fucking cool that you can do that. Being able to set like an entire field of grass on fire with a torch. The way that all of these different types of aspects in the game interact with one another, I think is immense. Like I said already, immensely impressive. Like, it is a sheer feat that they were able to make it so that hitting an ice enemy with a fire weapon doesn't just damage them, it disintegrates them. Like, that is so fucking cool.
I think the term for it, for like the style of games for it, is like immersive sandbox or stuff like that, where it's like, I don't know, if it definitely feels like they constructed the physics and rules of like object interactions first in the world and then made the game based off it. So everything intuitively fundamentally makes sense. Like fire disintegrates ice and sets dry grass on fire. Like, it just makes sense. You know? Yeah, sorry, go on.
No.
This is a point towards you not being a hater. I do like what Sam said. Like, they did the physics first. You know, metal weapons attract electricity, right? Stuff like that, where it's like, okay, there's actually a purpose to have wooden weapons beyond just, oh, it's an early item game. No. When you're in a thunderstorm, you need to use these certain weapons. When you're facing ice enemies or fire enemies, you have to use the opposing element. Like, there's an actual set of rules that's consistent throughout the game, even down to the level of, like, it wouldn't have made much sense if a fire sword is effective against the ice enemy, but it doesn't warm you up. But that's the standard for most video games. So credit where credit's due. They were actually very consistent with that aspect of their world building. That was a good point.
Yeah, and I don't know if you mentioned it or you're about to mention it already, so I'm sorry if I already took the wind from under you. But like, another aspect of this that really messes with me is that you can totally just abuse the system, because it's just a physics sandbox. I have gone through so many. I've gone through a few without it, and then the moment I realized I could do it, I have gone through so many electric-based dungeons by just dropping all my metal items and just drawing a new circuit. Like, because I can. Like, why not?
Yeah. And like, you have like so many weapons throughout the game, but like, you kind of almost always sort of want to keep like a shitty Deku leaf on you, because if you ever find a raft, you can just use your Deku leaf to like soar across rivers. Like,
yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, like, the fact that they have that sort of thing in the game at all, like a leaf, like that leaf literally does 1 damage. It's weaker than a tree branch. It's not gonna do much against any common enemy, but there's a purpose for it in the game. I think that is really fucking neat. It's just a shame that it kind of is inherently connected to the flaws in the variety and durability systems that we've just finished talking about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, on that point, there are, you know, different categories of weapons in my mind. Weapons in quotes, right? Like, you have the Korok leaf and torches, which are really utility items. Like, other than early game where you might try to bat away an enemy with a torch, you don't use it as a weapon. You use it as a functional tool. And then you have your weapons that you actually use in combat. But they're all grouped in the same inventory and under the same rules, which maybe, I guess, you could argue practically makes sense, but as a gameplay in a video game, it's kind of like, it's a little bit tough to get used to.
Yeah. And it's like a complete spectrum there, because like you were saying, you're not really going to use the Deku Leaf or the torch against most enemies. What are you going to do with a sword or a spear except attack enemies? And then you have like things in the middle, like the sledgehammer, which, yeah, you can attack enemies with, it's fine, but its best purpose is for breaking rocks. Like, instead of damaging your weapons, yeah. Axes for chopping down trees, exactly. So, like, the fact that there is that sort of physics engine built in, that diversity of what you can do, super, super amazing, super impressive. One of this game's coolest feats, and it is, in my opinion, just immediately hindered by being immediately tied into the weapon system itself. Okay, it's about 11 o'clock. Water break time.
God, I'm thirsty. I could have gotten up at any point in time, but still.
Yeah.
I was waiting for permission.
So I'm gonna get back into it with a topic that might not be the most interesting, but is prevalent for it is prevalent in Breath of the Wild for sure. Cooking. This game added cooking. It's like a crafting mechanic, but worse. Okay, so cooking in Breath of the Wild, I think, has its place, and it actually has like a really, really important place. Like if you use cooking effectively, you kind of like tame this game and make the world your own. If you have control over the elements and your ability to stealth and stamina and all that, the game provides you ways to do that. By mixing together ingredients found in the overworld or from hunting monsters, and mixing together meals and elixirs and all that good stuff. I think it's a cool implementation, and I don't think that most people are going to play through Breath of the Wild and just outright ignore that cooking is there. I think that everyone uses it to some degree. I feel like the game could have done a stronger part in emphasizing how important it was, but it's kind of hard to do that because the main issue that I have with it is that the game does not have a recipe book of any kind. And when you're mixing together 500,000 different ingredients from around the world, whether it's a dragonfly from the far north or a piece of wheat from the southeast, it leads to different ingredients. And it's kind of funny the first couple times that you completely fuck up cooking a meal and you get some dubious food and the game literally censors it out. That's a good gag. But I feel like that kind of disencourages people to try out new things with the cooking mechanic, because you don't want to make dubious food. You want to try and make something good. And really the only main way that you can learn recipes in this game is through side quests. You go to a random person and they're like, yeah, man, I came to visit this desert and shocker, it's fucking hot out here. I need you to make me a potion that's made with ice dragonflies and a watermelon. And that's how you learn how to make, a cooling potion. And then you have to remember that for the remainder of the, however many hours you play this game. Upwards of... Actually, out of curiosity, let me check real quick. How many hours have I put into Breath of the Wild? 145 hours. I have played this game for 145 hours. I could not tell you a single recipe that is ingrained in this game. There are simple ones like throw together some hearty mushrooms and some big radishes and stuff like that, and you'll get a good healing potion. But I feel like this game really needed something to like kind of condense, like, oh yeah, you mix these things together, you get this result. If you want to get, a potion that prevents you from taking electric damage, do these things, put these things together. And I think that would have made the cooking system feel a lot more explorative. That's not a word, but I made it up. That you could try new things and make it a little bit more fun that way. Finding just random NPCs throughout the world and trying to memorize the ingredients that get together. Like, yeah, you can kind of piece together that a warm dragonfly is going to go into a potion that makes you warmer. But what's like the best effect? Like, what's the good ratio of, number of dragonflies to monster teeth and stuff like that? So I think the cooking mechanic overall is really cool. I just think that it's missing that element to kind of bring it all together so that it's easier to access for more people. For me personally, I used it several times. It's just not something I like relied on to get through the game. And I think that they were kind of pushing that in some degree, especially if you're playing in like Master Quest or the harder difficulties.
This game needs a farming mechanic.
Okay, I disagree with that. Mining.
Yeah, I went through my first playthrough without using the cooking mechanic much beyond just simple Oh man, I gotta eat to get my hearts up.
Mm-hmm.
I used it more in my second playthrough, using not just effects, but hearty truffles and big radishes became my best friends.
Yeah.
Like, and I think it was carrots, like stamina carrots or whatever, that get you that extra gold. Yeah. Point being, those became like my best friends. They were awesome to have in the game.
Right.
We all know about cooking 5 durian fruits for 20 temp HP.
Yeah. And I think that you need more variety in those items. Like, yeah, you have your Endura carrots that help increase your endurance and stamina. But, like, if you're in the desert, like, fuck you, dude. You're not finding carrots in the fucking desert.
So I did appreciate that mechanic of, like, could they have explained it better? Yes, because like I said, my first playthrough, I went without using cooking beyond the bare essentials of what I needed to do. So the explanation of it could definitely improve, but I do think that was one of its, in terms of potential, one of its better mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish they extended that to other parts. I want more crafting in the game.
You just want to play Minecraft.
I just want to play Minecraft.
Why isn't this Minecraft?
Blocks in the games. There's the graphics are too good. We just need more blocks.
My thoughts. I don't know. I felt like it was pretty intuitive of like what to mix together, what not to mix together. Like monster parts do not mix with food. Bugs, you have bugs and monster parts. Those are potion, and then everything else is in the realm of real food,
right? To
make meals out of. I felt that that was pretty intuitive, and I felt like it was kind of intuitive of like what parts kind of did what. I do agree, to get like the most benefit out of it, you do kind of just have to memorize shit, which sucks. It felt like it was easy to get into, but to get the most out of, you had to like either look shit up or just write it down. Or
I feel like I couldn't master the cooking system is basically what it comes down to,
which is very frustrating. I agree. Like, I want to like abuse this. I want to turn the game inside out with this.
And it's so annoying because, again, kind of going back to like my very minor OCD, this game has a built-in compendium. So you can take pictures of like anything. You can take pictures of weapons and fruit and mushrooms, and like they all get stored in there. And once you take a picture of it, it registers in your log, tells you where to find that thing. Literally just add a page for recipes. That's all you gotta do. But again, it's a great mechanic. It works very well for kind of, again, encouraging that exploration and trying out new things. And I do appreciate that the game's not like hand-holding you in any aspect. It's not telling you, this is what you do for this, this is what you do for this. It's kind of like, you cook things, you mix them together, see what you get. But I think that there could have been at least a little bit more of a incentive for doing so in the quote-unquote right way, or like most effective way. I also don't like how you need a pot to mix things, and you don't really have any way to make a pot. So if you want to cook something, you have to go to like the nearest settlement. You can't just do it on any random campfire.
I'll be at like the end of like your first your main like spiel about cooking. I had my thoughts, and then like the last 2 words you said, I just started seeing red, and that was master mode. You said the words master mode, and it's god. I'm
gonna talk about master mode in a bit.
I love Breath of the Wild. I will defend so much of the game. Not that.
That's so interesting, because I'm not the exact opposite, but I'm gonna have a very different opinion, I think. So I'm very curious to hear more about that.
Okay.
The next part, did you have something to say, Caroline? I heard you speak up.
I asked what master mode was, but I can wait if you're gonna explain it later.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna go into that in just a little bit here. So that's cooking. Okay.
Quick thing. Caroline, I heard you visually react when I think it was Jeff who said that cooking was easy. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I do. If you have, like, I don't know Link's fucking physiology, okay? And if you have a description under like a fucking bokoblin horn or however the fuck you say it, and it says will increase your stamina or whatever it does, yeah, I'm gonna throw it into my food like seasoning. I don't know this man's life.
Yeah, I think that
It wasn't intuitive.
I think that it is intuitive once you like. This is dumb. This is completely contradictory to say. I think it's intuitive once you realize it. That's so dumb. I hate
Like-
that I said that. But like,
For me, it was like I fucked up once. I put monster parts together with like actual like food ingredients, and I was just like, oh, okay, so potion shit, real food shit, cool.
I simply thought I just didn't make a recipe. I was
Yeah.
like, oh shit, I didn't hit the right thing.
I think that that's exactly it, Caroline, is that you feel like almost you have to abide by a recipe where it's really just you mix things together and there's like a very clear divide between what can and cannot go together. For the most part, mix together mushrooms, coconuts, whatever you want, it's gonna turn out fine. But you throw one single Lizalfos horn in there, dubious food, or rock salt or whatever it creates. So I think that they could have explained that aspect a little bit better from the outset.
Yeah. Even if the old man had just said, who was like the king or something, apparently, had just like had a campfire and like had like a little recipe book or like a little notepad next to it, and you could read it and it said like monster parts plus fruit or veg, no good, upset stomach emoji.
And I think
You know what I mean?
I think they do have that character. He's just not in the tutorial area. I think he's at like one of the first stables you go to, and it kind of
Well,
explains.
whoever the woodsman is.
Right, yeah. I think once you
Also-
get off the Great Plateau, there's like a character in one of the first stable areas, like in that area right after the dueling mountains or dueling peaks or whatever they are. I think there's someone
like in
there.
the first hour of gameplay, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the king doesn't explain it.
No, he doesn't.
Is
To be
the
fair,
king
he's
the
probably
same
depressed.
person as the woodsman?
He's probably very depressed.
He's probably very depressed. I don't know if I'm counting on him to be a good teacher. But
He
I
was
do
just like, check out my sick ass paraglider. You want this? You want this? Oh, you want this so bad.
right now, go save my daughter. Anyways, what I was gonna say is what is it? Shit, wait, did I forget? I think I forgot. Never mind. I'll
Okay.
come back to it when I remember it.
Moving on to side quests and tangentially related to side quests, currency, because I think that these two things go together perfectly in Breath of the Wild. Fuck side quests in Breath of the Wild. Like, okay. I'm gonna go about this in a positive light. You can talk to a lot of people in this world. I did. So I'm diverting. I'm redirecting that anger towards something productive. You can talk to a lot of people in this world. This world is filled with a lot of NPCs. And the odds are that if you talk to an NPC, I'd say like 1 out of 3 to 1 out of 5 of them are going to have like some sort of mini quest for you to do. And there is a good amount of variety there. That mini quest can be, hey, I heard a secret, and that secret can end up leading you to a shrine. It can be, collect for me 45 of this one type of mushroom, and I'll give you a reward. Those are the only 2 examples coming to mind, because a lot of them feel kind of repetitive. And I think that the side quests do a good job of kind of convincing you to explore more throughout the world. That's the central core of this game. The game is trying to incentivize you to explore. If the side quests are there for that, they do their job fine. With key exceptions, I do not remember side quests in this game. There are key side quests in games like Skyrim, in games like Horizon, in games like I'm several shots deep. I can't remember any other open world game at this point that they make you understand the world a bit better. You get to know some cool characters. Breath of the Wild doesn't really do that. The Breath of the Wild doesn't care about the NPC characters. They're just kind of there to populate the world. And they fit into the world really weirdly because like the world is completely devastated, but people are still just kind of living their lives mostly unaffected in many instances.
Wait. What about that guy who wanted you to help him hook up with the hotel girl? You telling me that guy didn't matter?
See, I mean, like, hey, maybe this is
that. I remember that quest. That one was literally, hey, get 100 of this bug.
Is that the 100 crickets guy? Fuck that.
Yeah, the 100 crickets guy. He was just like, okay, this girl told me she likes crickets. I need you to do me a solid here, bro. I need 100 of these things.
Whatsoever.
And like, at one point is your open world game like trolling you? At what point is your game going from, hey, explore our world is really cool, to, hey, get a magnifying glass and look for fucking bugs, because like that's what we got for you at the moment. The side quests don't really do it for me in this game. I will talk to NPCs, I will pick them up when I have them, but I'm never really going out of my way to do them because, segueing into this part about currency, the rewards are almost never worth it. The rewards you get are like a potion that helps increase your stealth. Cool. Could have made that on my own with the ingredients I just got for you. Or it's like, yay, you collected 45 rock mushrooms for me. Here's 50 rupees. Cool. By the end of this game, you have 15,000 rupees. Why do you fucking care at that point? I think that they put rupees in this game because it's Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. Rupees are a Legend of Zelda staple. They needed to throw them in somehow. I don't think rupees needed to be in this game whatsoever. And the fact that like you barely get them from cutting grass, it just kind of feels like it's like a tongue-in-cheek, almost Easter egg at that point to even have them in. The rupee market is so inflated. The capitalist system that we live in Hyrule at this point is completely fucked, and I don't like it. I just think that having that reliance on do this quest for me and you'll get some rupees when rupees don't really do much for you, especially by the end game. Like, yeah, you can buy more ancient arrows. Maybe if you're missing some key pieces of armor, you can buy those too. But you usually have enough rupees for most things. And if you don't, you can just sell the 500 different pieces of monster parts that you have, and you'll instantly get all the rupees you need. So the currency system just feels kind of forced almost at that point. Like I feel like with the world that you have in Breath of the Wild, like this almost post-apocalyptic Hyrule, a bartering system would have been more effective. And kind of given more weight to like the collection of items and stuff.
Especially given most of the places are situated in villages.
Right.
I had 2 points. One, I remembered what I was going to say with the food, that this kind of related, that there's kind of an artificial application of our perspective of monsters versus animals. Like you could, like kind of like Carolyn said, if you're in an open world game, you might as well just assume that everything's related. Like, why make the dubious food thing just because you put one monster part in? But that's not here or there. On this topic, I do feel like, on this topic, I do feel like the side quest, this kind of related to, Jeff, I don't think you were here when we were discussing this, where we were like, with the open world game, ideally you'd like to have some way to Yeah, ideally you'd like to have some way to play the game without the main story. In the sense of like, yes, most games have a main story that you want to try to complete, but there's some way that you can kind of live in and enjoy the open world without the main story. And the side quests don't really do it in this game. Most of it is either not, it's kind of independent, it's not really related to each other. It's just random stuff here and there, or it's related to the main story. And I think that for me, looking at an open world game, you'd like to have some way to make your own path. Like the house building one, I honestly enjoyed. That was one of the side quests I thought were more enjoyable, but you don't use your house for anything. So
what do you mean? I used my house to set up my weapons on the wall and take nice pictures of them for my compendium.
Break after 5
Can you
hits.
not target me like that again?
The house served like one actual functional purpose, and that was at the end of the like DLC like mission thing where like at the end you get the motorcycle. You also get like a little picture of Link and all the champions and Zelda, you know, obviously before the Calamity, and it goes and Link frames it and puts it on like on a dresser in his house, which is really awesome.
Oh,
and
that's
like
nice.
that
I actually
that,
didn't
like,
know that. That's cool.
yeah, like I only figured it out because I waited until after that DLC to do so, to build my house.
I mean, there are lots of cool side quests that do stand out, like fucking Terrytown, like that iconic.
I was gonna ask when you were gonna talk about Terrytown.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, I almost want someone else to talk about Terrytown, because what my opinion boils down to is that like super cool side quest to like build your own kind of community could have done more with it. It feels like a prototype for what they wanted to do of like building like starting to rebuild this area of Hyrule, and like it's
The Sims.
yeah, right. It's so cool. I love Terrytown. I just feel like I almost wanted it to be more because it was so cool and it stood out in a realm of relatively mundane side quests.
I think for me, centralizing A, likable characters, B, doing it in a way that makes you feel a real sense of accomplishment, and C, centralizing those goods, it was very important for me.
Right.
I would just go to Terrytown to fuck around sometimes. I liked it so much.
Mm-hmm. My thing was that like I felt like once I was finished building Terrytown, then it was hard for me to have a reason to go back. Like I wanted there to be like a little bit more of a drive to kind of return. Like what do they have for me now? Like can I keep expanding it from there? But that's just my preferred play style compared to somebody else's, you know. I wanted a little bit more drive with that. But if that is, but like you were saying, it was important to you, and I think again that's something that Breath of the Wild does really well, is that it can have side quests that are varied enough that somebody finds that value where someone else might not, and I might find just as much value in a completely different side quest that maybe another person didn't even do because it's so far out of the way or something.
I do think they tried to do that with, I think there's some like merchants there that sell the Hylian sword or other rare items if you break it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the
Hylian
Hylian shield.
Talking about.
Yeah, but only if you've already found the Hylian shield.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they tried to do that. I do wish, I'm kind of in agreement. I do wish they expanded. First of all, I wish that Link's home was in Terrytown, you know, the town that he helped build.
Or he could build a second home, like, you know, do both.
Yeah. And he helped like the village chief hook up. So like that man was there from the start. But no, I do think Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild overall is kind of like snippets into different genres. Like, oh, let's put a little crafting mechanism in via cooking. let's put a little bit of village building in via Terrytown, but it never really committed to anything.
Mm-hmm. And to
like let's just go ahead.
Yeah, and to like spoil my kind of crux of this whole review is that Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild feels like the best prototype for a modern Zelda game. Like, I think that looking at this game and saying, this is the greatest game ever made, it is the best Zelda game in the entire 35-year franchise, I think that's going a little bit far because there's so much in here that feels like it doesn't fit or it's not fully polished out. But I feel like Breath of the Wild 2, or like even just 5 years down the line, if we get a completely unrelated new Zelda game, this game set the groundwork for what future Zelda games could be. And I'll get back to that point a little bit later. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on to a couple short sections here. Dialogue, which feels a little bit weird. I'm not talking about voice acting quite yet, but just like dialogue in general. It's been said, man, that sounded like a shitty college essay opener, but it's been said that Breath of the Wild Link does not have much of a personality, that he's a little bit too much of a self-insert. I think that when you look for it, that this game does give you opportunities to see more of a personality in him. A lot of the dialogue options the game gives you can actually be genuinely pretty funny. Like, Link can be a little bit of a snarky asshole from time to time. But
I am he,
yeah. I feel like it's it doesn't really matter, because when we're going to get to story. Trust me, we're going to get to the story aspect. But when story takes so much of a backseat to the rest of the game that it doesn't allow Link to really develop much as a character, having these dialogue options for whether he's, he answers compassionately or he answers in a sarcastic tone, yeah, it's funny in the moment. It doesn't really matter for the character as a whole. That's really all I have to say about dialogue options. It doesn't have like branching trees or anything that affect the way the story progresses based on how you respond. It's just it feels like again kind of a staple they're trying to carry over from other Zelda games, that you can respond in slightly different ways. You get the end result whatsoever. It's just that without that focus of Link in the main crux of the story, that's really the only personality you're getting out of him, which feels underwhelming, in my opinion. And then the last section, I know there's definitely stuff I missed, but the last section I have here in the category of mechanics comes down to the DLC and Amiibo functionality. So, if you have not played Breath of the Wild since it launched, there was DLC that came I think it was a full year after the game launched, if not longer. That added actually some really cool stuff. Like, it added an entire new sub-dungeon. It added extra challenges for late game to kind of test your fighting skills and stuff like that. Really cool stuff. It honestly one of the better pieces of DLC that Nintendo has released in recent years. And it also came with a bike. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they gave Link a motorcycle. That was weird. They gave him a motorcycle when he joined Mario Kart, and I feel like they felt obligated to include that in the canon lore somehow. I don't really know how to explain that. Link has a motorcycle now. It's fine.
I enjoy the motorcycle. The motorcycle feels like the 3 developers were like, no, fuck you. We made this. Put it in.
It's just the most out of left. You could have put Epona in, and it would have done literally the exact same thing. Maybe not as.
It wouldn't. It would make people happy.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's just weird that he has a motorcycle now. But I'll roll with it. It's cool.
I get why they didn't add Epona. They don't want to add like named character horse in a game where
But they did.
Horses can die.
But they did. They added Epona in with Amiibo functionality. If you scan the link on a horse Amiibo, you get Epona in the game. It is named Epona. It has, like, I'm pretty sure some of the better stats among the horses in the game.
Colin, you are looking at either selling one DLC or selling DLC and Amiibo.
That is fair. Gotta think about capitalism. You're so right. So DLC, highly recommend. Most of the Amiibo, you can do with. Okay, the Guardian Amiibo, I wish I had. That thing is actually really cool. It's big. It's got, like, you can move the arms around and stuff. That's really neat. I think that Amiibo kind of popped off with Breath of the Wild. And I don't think Amiibo has been the same since. I don't think any game has cared nearly as much on the Nintendo Switch about Amiibo. But Nintendo still feels obligated to make them. So they're going to keep doing that.
Because they sell.
People
keep buying them, so why would they stop making them?
Motherfucking shout out to The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, which made an Amiibo that locks behind it the ability to fast travel. That is grade A Nintendo capitalism bullshit, and I kind of love it. The only...
I don't know, Skyward... it's unrelated, but yeah, Skyward Sword, like, playing through it, I don't know, that doesn't feel like, yeah, that's an important ability, but there are already bird statues everywhere there that you can just,
Right. It's just weird. At least in Breath of the Wild, it gives you different things, like, it gives you certain items or armor or Epona. And then, by far, the coolest Amiibo is the Wolf Link Amiibo compatibility with Breath of the Wild. I don't know if that's just my Twilight Princess bias showing, but being able to scan in your little wolf and it gives you a dog companion to follow you around and fight with you, that is so beyond cool.
I didn't know it did that. That's really cool.
That's so cool. The downside, which... Okay. Again, it all ties together. It's a money-making scheme. I understand. The downside is that if you just have the Wolf Link Amiibo and you scan it, it gives you the dog. The dog has 3 hearts, and that's as many hearts as it can get. You know how you make your dog, your wolf, get more hearts? You have to beat the DLC dungeon in Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD on the Wii U, and then you scan the Amiibo there. And then it has more hearts when you scan it into Breath of the Wild. That's fucking bullshit. It's fucking stupid. It's still really cool that you can have a dog companion in Breath of the Wild.
Audacity of it all.
I kind of do. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's kind of funny.
It's like in Legends Arceus where they make you, if you want a certain Pokemon from one of the side quests, you have to boot up
oh my god,
Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl to go to that library to read a myth and then play Legends Arceus, which takes place in the past, and perform that myth to get that Pokemon.
And the game does not really tell you to do this effectively. It's just like, yeah, there's a book.
Yeah, you just have to know that you kind of have to do all that. And
it is hard to put within a game seamlessly, hey, go play that other game that we sell, just to make sure you have that other game we sell.
They didn't even make like a Twitter post about it or anything.
I like the idea of play a different game that takes place after this game to learn what you have to do in the game that takes place in the past. But damn, that's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. So at the time of this recording, it has recently been rumored that we will have a Nintendo Direct in September, and as part of that Direct, we will be getting Switch releases of both Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD. So if that does come to fruition, highly recommend anybody to get the Wolf Link Amiibo and Twilight Princess HD. Both very much worth your while. At least if you want a little fun, cute little dog companion to go with you in Breath of the Wild. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say.
No,
I
go
thought you
on.
were going to say it was rumored that there would be a Nintendo Direct in September, and I was just like, rumor? They do it every year. I didn't know they rumored the. I really hope that happens. I love Twilight Princess so much.
Yeah. Maybe I'll make a review on Twilight Princess one day, and it'll be effortlessly more positive. Even though I acknowledge that game has many flaws. But that's all that the Amiibo and DLC section comes down to, is that a lot of it's really scummy. A lot of it's them trying to drain you of every single dollar that's in your wallet. But a lot of it's also really cool. With the DLC, you get like I said, you get a whole new dungeon that comes with a entirely unique boss fight that is not just a Blight Ganon variant. That's really cool. Could have done that in the other dungeons. Anyway, moving on. So that's all I have for the mechanics section, and I want to take a brief little interlude here to talk about music and the lack thereof. That's not to say that Breath of the Wild does not have music. You can find plenty of YouTube videos that would tell you otherwise, that the game has plenty of music and it's beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous music that is in this game.
Lo-fi Terrytown beats to study and relax too.
Literally banger after banger.
What I was studying to yesterday was just our repeat of some good old lo-fi Legend of Zelda music, mostly from Breath of the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice.
Now here's my take, and this is definitely like one of the weakest arguments I have, and it all comes down to personal preference. I don't like the music in this game. It fits in perfectly with the world. The ambient tunes, like the kind of like subtle, like the chimes hitting when you hit morning, the piano tunes when it go into sunset. Like it's all perfect for Breath of the Wild. I really want a game typically that has music that really sticks out to me. And that's not, again, it's not to say that Breath of the Wild has bad music or even unmemorable music. You can play a tune from Breath of the Wild, like dun 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 dun, like the standard tune that you hear when dawn is rising, and it's recognizable, it's iconic, or Cass's accordion playing. That's really, really good, but it's not the same as the Temple of Time soundtrack or the Lost Woods or Arbiter's Ground or anything like that. I think that, again, all my personal taste, the music in previous entries of The Legend of Zelda is more vibrant, more bombastic, more iconic as a soundtrack, whereas I think the music in Breath of the Wild is perfect for the ambient kind of empty world that you are exploring, but it doesn't kind of hit the same keys for me, pun intended, as the more written out, like symphonic tunes from the rest of the franchise. I'm encouraging feedback on this one because I know that this is a lot of people love the soundtrack in this game, and I absolutely do not blame you.
I do enjoy. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I enjoy the there are certain moments that call for more loud, more like the music should reflect the intensity of what is happening, and sometimes there are intense moments. However, and this is something that I don't think enough games understand these days, is that sometimes it is important for the game to shut the hell up.
I actually 100% agree with that. The sound of silence is so important.
And the fact that Breath of the Wild knows when to shut up and let me just be in the world is so important to me.
Yeah, like I said, it's all just personal preference. Mm-hmm. I like having those tunes that are more easy to hum along to, like da 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 da, like that. That iconic track sort of thing. You can't really do that with most of the songs in the Breath of the Wild soundtrack, And there's not like one key one that like stands out. It's like, oh, like that's the banger. Like they're all kind of on the same level, and that level is good. But for me, it doesn't really exceed beyond that.
Yeah. For that example specifically, the like Lost Woods, if I remember correctly, like the theme of that is tones down, you know, to match like the sort of the rest of the vibe for you know, the rest of the game. It'd be weird if that was where the game, you know, got loud, but I do agree, like, and I don't blame you for like, you know, I also enjoy those iconic tracks, but you know,
that's something that like I would never like die on that hill. I would never say that the game has bad music or anything like that. It is just not my preferred style of music, and I will always 100% back that the music Breath of the Wild has is perfect for the game that it is.
I think it's good on the ambience front. But ideally in the game, you'll have moments of ambience and moments of, you know, like your boss fights. And I think that's where it's a bit lacking.
Right.
Where in those hype moments, the music doesn't rise correspondingly. You don't want like a super hype theatric soundtrack when you're entering a village. You know, the ambience of Breath of the Wild. Okay, well, I don't want that. I don't know about you guys. But the ambience of Breath of the Wild actually works really well, and I think that's why you get those lo-fi remixes, right? Because it is a very relaxing, atmospheric music. But I do think that when we were entering those boss fights or particularly key moments, then the music felt, okay, maybe you could rise up a little bit.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you what the soundtrack is when you fight Calamity Ganon at the end of the game.
Exactly.
I can tell you what the soundtrack goes like when it's, you know, you're fighting Girahim in Skyward Sword, or when you're fighting even just like regular bosses in Twilight Princess or Majora's Mask. Like I just think those are more defined, but again, it ties together really well in Breath of the Wild. And well, I'm not going to say that now because that ties into a later point. Okay. This is a weird subsection that I have here. The category that I titled it is content. This game has a lot of that, but there are two main things that I want to focus in on the content. The first one is things, which is very broad. I know. There's a lot of stuff in this game. There's a lot of fruits. There's a lot of items for like strengthening weapons, and there's a lot of monster parts and a lot of weapons, and there's just a lot of stuff, which is great in that you can go to the top of the hill you see in the distance, and there's a treasure chest there, and there's something in it. It does end up leaving it to a dice roll whether or not that thing in that chest is actually something you even want. There are chests in this game that you open up and they give you 5 arrows. Cool, thanks. I got 37 already. That's not really the major thing I need right now, but I'll take it. So yeah, there's just like a lot of stuff, and it ends up making it feel kind of cluttered. And you have to go back and forth a lot. You know, if you're trying to make sure you have all the strongest weapons, you're going into your inventory all the time to see that, okay, what's like the weakest weapon I have? But, oh, do I need to like still take a picture of that to register it in my compendium so I can track that sort of thing later? Again, I think that latter part is mostly tied to me wanting to fill out the compendium. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. Yeah, there's just a lot in there, and I think it's simultaneously cool and also overwhelming. I don't think that the game should try and push you toward, like Caroline was mentioning earlier, like the completion tracker. I don't think the game should push you toward like opening every treasure chest or exploring every nook and cranny of the world. I think it should encourage you to explore the world as you see fit. and some of the elements of this game don't necessarily do that. So if you have like the hat and the leggings for a piece of armor, I know I feel inclined at least to search out and find the chest plate for that piece of armor. And if I don't find it, then it's going to just take a long trek to try and see where it is. The game doesn't really give you a lot of direction for that. It is really nice that you have the tracker ability, that once you take a photo of something in your compendium, then you can search for it and the game will kind of like ping when you're near it. That's really cool and really beneficial, especially when you have as many things in this game as you do. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to... Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and also just on side quest where the game does not intend for you to leave the area. Like on the way up to Goron Mountain, there is a quest to collect like 10 salamanders in like the first little mining area you get to on the way up. And that is where the compendium shines. Right. And the tracker thing shines. And that's a very important side story because it results in heat resistant armor. I remember correctly.
Yeah, I believe you're right. So it works together very well. I personally found it a little bit overwhelming. Like, I don't think we needed quite as many things for health restoration. Like, do we need really 7 different types of mushrooms in this game? Probably not. Do we need a mushroom, a dragonfly, a lizard, and a butterfly that all represent one of the different elements? Probably not. But that's the way that they're going to kind of fill out this world. I'm okay with playing through it that way. I'm not really torn one way or the other. It just is what it is, you know?
I'm not. On the discussion of content, is there a purpose for the content? Like, it's easy to fill out a game. Okay, I won't say easy. It's not super difficult to fill out a game with content where there's just 5, 6, quite a few equivalents of the same exact thing. Is there a variety of usage in the content that you get? Like, is there different ways to play the game based on content? I felt like that was lacking where, the butterflies are a good example. Butterflies and mushrooms, right? It's like you have a lot of different variety within those categories. But is there a distinct advantage to having like, oh, I got this butterfly that if I cook up will give me heat resistant potion versus the mushroom that will maybe give me the same thing? I felt like they were trying to expand the content, but there wasn't really much purpose, like much usage behind, besides just here's 2 different ways to get this same exact thing.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it works really well. Like, if you're in the desert area, and the desert area has a lot of the electric resistant grasses, then you can get those grass pieces and that's what you need for it. Whereas if you're in the winter area, you can get the winter grass. It's whatever. It works fine because the world is so expansive. But once you get like toward, halfway, maybe even like a third of the way through the game, your inventory of like craftable or cookable items is already like 4 pages long. And at that point, do you really need that many things when a lot of them are going to provide the same function to you? Do you really need that heat-resistant lizard, that heat-resistant butterfly, that heat-resistant grass on top of your already heat-resistant armor, which is going to be pretty much, I think, what most people is like first action is to change whatever clothes you're wearing? Probably not. But I get why it's in this massive open world game. The thing that I don't get about this open world game are the things that aren't in it. And this goes back to 4 keywords. The Legend of Zelda. This franchise has gone over 35 years, has so many unique, iconic enemies. Why does this game have 7? This game has 7 enemies. I am sorry, I have some phlegm in my throat. This game, I'm on the Legend of Zelda wiki. Looking at like the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, you know, the mainline game that came out right before this, iconic enemies that stand out from the Zelda franchise that were in Skyward Sword, like Armos, Beamos, Bokoblin, Choo-Choo, Lizalfos, Keese, Spumes, what else is on? Moblins, Octoroks, Peahats, Skulltulas, Stalfos, what are they called? Not the wall grabbers. Floor masters, that's what they are. All those different enemies. If you go to the Breath of the Wild section on enemies, the first one they have listed is Bee. Like Bumblebee. That's not an enemy. That's a hazard at most. You whack it with your stick and they go away, my guy. For actual enemies in this game, Bokoblin, Choo-Choo, Guardians, Keese, Lizalfos, Moblin, Octorok, Peblets, and Wizrobe. That is all the unique enemies that this game has. Granted, it has some like mini bosses like the Lynels and the Hinoxes and stuff, but there is so much potential here. Everything is just a variation of something else. Yeah, you have Bokoblins, and then you have blue Bokoblins, and then you have black Bokoblins, and then you have silver Bokoblins. Why do we need that many different types of things when you could throw in a different kind of enemy? Obviously, the resources and production. I'm not going to say that developing a game is easy or anything like that, especially one of this size. But, like, man, it feels like they dropped the ball so hard on implementing the kind of variety that the Zelda franchise was known for with its enemies. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier with, like, bosses and stuff as well. Okay, you go to Vah Rudania, you have a Ganon Blight. You go to Vah Rudania, you have a Water Blight. You go to Vah Naboris, you have a different Blight. It's all the same thing over and over again. And it's really draining when the game tries to incentivize you to explore it to its full potential. And you're just doing the same thing to the same enemy over and over again. And if you do it on Master Quest, it just makes the enemies damage sponges. So you get to the Great Plateau, and your first encounter is with silver Bokoblins. Why the fuck are you doing that to me? That's insane.
Yeah, and like the bosses on Master Mode, well, all enemies will regenerate health if you aren't
constantly damaging.
Yeah, if you aren't constantly damaging. That is so awful for bosses where they are just invincible.
Like Thunderblight Ganon. Like, fuck off, dude. He's literally moves faster than light.
The Thunderblight's like the worst for that. But like every single like Blight Ganon has like a cutscene thing where it wants to transition to the next phase. So it just kind of turns into a blue blob and just goes there, and you can't hit it during that. It's fine in normal mode because it doesn't regenerate health. But like that like transition thing takes so long that in master mode the game is just like, okay, you went 5 seconds without hitting it, it's regenerating health, have fun.
Yeah, it's just like I said, I feel like they dropped the ball on that, and I'm really praying that Breath of the Wild 2 has more enemies, because in the short trailers they've shown us, it's the same ones, the exact same ones we saw in Breath of the Wild. It's the same moblins, same bokoblins. There was like one like rock creature that looked a little bit different than the rock creatures we have in this game, but please bring back some of like those other really cool enemies, like, you know, the bubbles, like the flying skulls that are on fire. That's really cool and unique. I'd love to see those things again instead of 17 variations on the same moblin.
Yeah, it's stuff like that where it's just like you're reminded that, oh yeah, the thing that Breath of the Wild, like the game that they were making that eventually became Breath of the Wild, was being made since the Wii.
Right.
Like the game, it was intended to be a Wii U launch title, and yeah.
It was a Wii U death title.
Yeah. It was. So hopefully, like, that element of development hell is absent for Breath of the Wild 2.
Yeah. Hopefully. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
We're getting into the last sections here. So questions, comments, any add-ons to anything that we've talked about so far from anybody?
I will say, like, the lack of enemies, yeah, it does suck, but regarding, like, at least the trailers for Breath of the Wild 2, I get why they've only showed enemies we've already seen.
Yeah,
they are the iconic enemies. Like, you can't show a Zelda game without being like you can't have a Zelda game without bokoblins in it.
Yeah,
like,
right.
They are absolutely mandatory.
Right. I'm not expecting them to just like only show off fucking likes or something like that. Like, that'd be stupid. Yeah. But
one's not gonna be happy unless the next one has ticks in it.
Yeah. You say that like a Hollow Knight reference, but Legend of Zelda has an enemy called Tektites, and that's close enough, you know?
My bad.
Okay. So I have to do this only because Sam had it in his Elden Ring review. Let's talk about sex appeal.
Yeah.
All right. Breath of the Wild.
Bitch.
Shockingly for a Nintendo game, Breath of the Wild does have it. Like, when I edit this, I'm gonna throw up a couple screenshots here of the scene where Link gets like the female Gerudo armor. Like, come on, dude. Like, whew. What do you want from me?
Dev said we need everyone to admit that they like men at least a little.
Literally. But like, there's so many kings and queens in this game. You got fucking Urbosa, queen of them all, I swear to God. You have that scene of Zelda crawling that the internet was just like, yeah, we're gonna focus in on Zelda's ass, and that's gonna become her defining characteristic for this cutscene. Yeah, this game, lo and behold, somehow has it. You can find plenty of Rule 34 on these characters, specifically from this variation of the Zelda franchise. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think that's a beautiful thing. Oh man, I didn't even talk about Sidon. Can we talk about Sidon real quick?
Said if we didn't.
I remember when the trailer for this game came out and I saw Sidon and I was like, damn, they made a fish sexy? That's crazy.
Takes some guts.
It takes some guts for sure.
Maybe I spent a little too long in Gerudo Village. Maybe that's okay.
On a related note, because obviously this topic is worth discussing further. I'm big. This is not like an open world necessity, but if you have a lot of developed characters, it's okay. Let's talk romance, guys, because that's obviously why you play Zelda games. I did enjoy that they just slipped that in every once in a while. Like, I think it was Papaya was her name.
Oh, yeah.
Gerudo Village, they slipped in the Jewel Girl. What was her name? The one who sold you jewels.
Right.
They actually slipped that stuff in because, you know, Zelda was in the castle, so you got to give Link something to go on. That was nice. It was like, oh wow, they're developed characters.
Damn, it's almost like these NPCs were tried to be designed as like real people. That's crazy. That, like, I think so many games overlook that, and they're just like, yeah, this NPC is a conduit for game design, but what if we actually made them have character? That'd be cool.
And let's not forget the Zelda Legend of Zelda Classic, there is a fish that is a little too attracted to Link.
I can't bring jokes aside a little bit. The purpose of having, like, you want characters who are capable of that. Like, not that, oh, there's actually a romance option for Link, or, oh my god, this character's super hot. But more like, oh, these are characters that are actually fleshed out enough that you could, you know, have those communities that ship Link with them.
Yeah.
Because they're actual characters.
Yeah, you could absolutely have like headcanons of, you know, Link having a, you know, a step on me kink with one of the Gerudo women, like all of the Gerudo women at the same time, you know. So like,
I mean, well, that's a lot. But...
yeah, I mean, it is interesting that we talk about like sex appeal here as almost like, you know, I introduced it almost like a joking manner, but it is funny how you bring up that it almost plays into like character development, and I think that's a really interesting point to me.
Yeah, and not like, oh my god, they have to be sexy, right? Like that's not the point. That's just like kind of like a byproduct. But I think that whether you talk about a anime show, a TV show, whatever, it speaks volumes if there's a character that is intended to, like, they only show up for one side quest, but they have enough of a profound impact, whether it's because of how they talk, the story that they have, that you have a fan base that's gonna run with that.
Right.
Because not every character is like that. Like, frankly, most of the Legend of Zelda side characters, if you ask me what their names were, what their stories were, I could not tell you, right? But there are those moments in there, like the romance characters tend to be the first ones story developers focus on. Ideally, I'm hoping that in Breath of the Wild 2, you expand that to have the best friend characters or whatever. Like, does he have a friend? Guys?
In Twilight Princess, he's friends with several like 6-year-olds.
Yeah.
No. No.
And said 6-year-olds harass him and literally block him from progressing until he gives into their demand, until he arms them with a sword.
Right. So point being, like, the focus, you know, sex appeal was like the opening topic of this. But the thing is, like, does Link have any like friends in this game that he can talk to? No. Frankly, do we know anything about his family? No. Does he have any love interest? Like, I don't even know if Zelda counts. No. Like, you know, we don't have much to go on with Link because there isn't really much dialogue option that is significant. And there's no backstory either.
Yeah.
So it's like, at least I get that maybe it would be a departure from Zelda's core format if you try to make the choices matter format, as I think Steam calls it. But then at least expand on his backstory so he has something.
Yeah. I think fleshing out more of the NPCs in the world would go a long way. Because when you were talking about like having that character in any form of media, the one that jumped to my mind, don't want to drop a major spoiler, but there's a character in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood who gets ganked in episode 10, like 10 out of 64 of the entire show. And people love that character. Like, he is a fan favorite character, and he's only around for 10 episodes of that show. And so I think, like, you can have those characters that have that impact, even if they're not on screen all the time in your massive open world game. And yeah.
I do want to...
Go on, Caroline.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
I do want to say I feel like those characters that NPCs in that game do have that at points, like especially like the divine, the people who help you, the champions or whatever.
Yes.
I feel like they definitely have that. I feel like I watched like the backstory with them, and like I feel like Link does have backstory in that way. I feel like I watched like the little backstories, and like as you learned about them, like I felt more connected to them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's entirely fair to say, well, there's no backstory in this game.
I think more
Also,
what
like,
Rohan was getting at was like the more generic NPCs as opposed to like the central story related characters.
I don't know. I think the world's too big to like
not making every single one fleshed out, obviously.
Not every single one. Like, there's too many people to meet that it's not like every person in the village, but those not even every side quest, but some of those side quest characters are a good opportunity to just have a character that's memorable. And I feel like it didn't have that. Now, point being, a lot of my critique for Breath of the Wild, this is kind of like an overview. It's not like, oh my god, this is terrible. It's more, you can expand on this.
Where to go from here.
Good. Exactly, it's where to go from here, because we know that there's a game, like a sequel coming up, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that speaks volumes to why I think it's a great game. Like, if you told me it's in your top 25, top 20, whatever, I wouldn't be mad. Top 10 even, like, I wouldn't be mad, right? A lot of the feedback is really just like, where can it go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And this is an area where you're absolutely right. Like, those guardians, not guardians, champions. Sorry, or I guess the people who are supposed to take over as champions, are really like a good example. But they're kind of extreme. Like, you don't even need that much detail. It's just something that's memorable. More that interacting with them will highlight Link's character. I think Link's character is very obscure for most interactions.
I think a good example is, and correct me if I'm wrong if this isn't what you're getting at, but is like the one carpenter that starts at your house, but then he goes off on his own to start Terrytown. I think that his name might be Terry. I don't remember. I haven't played it in a while. But I think like that carpenter has like a good amount of like characterization behind him, that he feels like a real character instead of, like I said earlier, a conduit for game design.
He does. And the dialogue doesn't, like, did he have much more dialogue than another MCC? Like, within each quest? Not really. But the arc was there.
Right.
Right? Where you follow him through his arc, and by extension, you kind of see, like, oh, Link's gonna help this guy build a village and get a wife. That's okay. Go Link.
Yeah.
Is helping people out. But, you know, there's actual character there. You build a community, and you give an opportunity for Link to build his own character. Because, like I said, there's not really much dialogue stuff. And with everything, like, Link is very much, I think someone says self-insert. Like, you pretty much have to self-insert yourself, because there's not much to go on with this version of Link.
Basically just having more characters that I think connect to Link himself, as opposed to just like inherently existing in the world and not really doing much beyond. Like, if you're in the story, I'm not saying every NPC has to be this way, but just like more that leave kind of that lasting impact, I think would go a long way for fleshing out the connections that Link makes. Because as it stands, you know, in Breath of the Wild, obviously you have the champions who are all dead, and then you have like the new champions who, once you're done with their side quest, you never really talk to again.
Colin, were you intending to talk about the plot a bit?
Yes, actually, the story section is the next part. the last major part of this review. Okay, so. When I talk about story, I'm actually going to go way, way back to, again, I believe it is October 2016. No, sorry, February 2017, about a month before the game drops. Nintendo releases a trailer for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild that, to this day, remains my favorite video game trailer of all time. It is a bar above what any other video game trailer has presented. It is cinematic, it is dramatic, it is gripping in so many different ways. And I don't know if it was because of the hype built around this game of being 6 years out from the last console Legend of Zelda, but like the music swelling, the characters having voice acting in The Legend of Zelda for the first time, that was insane. And I see this trailer and I go in thinking that this is going to be a Zelda story to revolutionize all Zelda stories. definitely set the bar very high for myself. I understand that. I was setting myself up for disappointment. But I think that the trailer did an amazing job of setting out what this story would entail. And then you open the game, and the story immediately takes a backseat. You know, you have your opening area, and the game's like, okay, go explore. But you don't really do much in terms of story. You know, it gives you the feedback, or not the feedback, it gives you the backlog of what happened. You know, you're waking up after 100 years, you can kind of piece all that together, go fight Ganon, and once you beat that, you save that, and that's kind of the story in and of itself. Again, the game gives you the chance to explore the world in many different ways. You don't even have to go to the Divine Beasts. So the game kind of has to make its story that way. It's restrained by that. They can't have a huge story moment tied behind going and taking down Va Meadow in the Rito Village if a lot of people aren't ever going to go to the Rito Village. And so the story ends up falling very much to the backside, and the way that they do this hurts me so fucking badly in the form of the memories. The most quintessential part of the story of Breath of the Wild is hid behind optional, like, essentially collectibles hidden throughout the world. I fucking hate it. I hate it so much, because if you play through all of Breath of the Wild and you don't see those memories, you miss so much. You miss so much characterization. You miss so much development. You miss all of the core emotional beats that this game has to offer, and it's all optional. Why would you do that to your game? You are shooting it in the leg. Oh my god, it's painful. Like, I can watch that scene of Zelda going to that the shrine of Din or whatever it is, and not being able to connect with her powers, and she's just like so frustrated, and I feel that raw emotion. Having voice acting in this game is perfect. It pushes it to another level. And then when you collect all of them, you get kind of like that final memory where it's the end. You know what the story that came before was. Everything fell apart. You lost. That is the story. You lost. You failed. You died. You literally fucking died. And Zelda is like weeping on your shoulder. It hits so fucking hard. And people are going to play the game and never see that. That's, oh my god. I can't express enough how brutally painful that is to me, that they would make that optional content. And how that, I think, is one of the biggest flaws Nintendo has made in any form of game design in the past decade, if not longer. I'm going to take a break and let other people speak, because I know I went off there and I need to take a drink.
It's your thing. We're here to listen to you.
Nah.
Yeah. I got for that. That was powerful. Yeah, I'll piggyback off that while you take a breather. I remember I was talking to you while, I was playing that game, and I'm like, is there a post game for this? And you were like, no, Legend of Zelda doesn't really do post games. And the reason I had asked was because they had done a pretty good job of building up. Out of all the characters, I thought one area that I cannot fault, but I think Breath of the Wild did really well, was build up Zelda. And I didn't fully unlock all the memories when I was playing it through the first time. I went back and did them. But I enjoy when a game... We're just going to talk about plot for a bit. I enjoy when a game can introduce flaw in a character and still make them very likable. And they did that with Zelda, where her struggle with her powers and her inability to achieve them kind of manifested in her resentment of Link, who was portrayed as this perfect character. Like, oh, he's the guardian, he's a champion of champions, he's just succeeding, and Zelda can't access her powers, and she kind of she put some of that resentment that she had at her own shortcomings towards Link, and the memories showed that. And I agree that later on, I can't imagine not having seen those, even though I played through it without the memories. I can't imagine enjoying the story as much as I did if I didn't have those memories accessible, because it made saving Zelda that much more meaningful, to me at least, because you saw her character growth of, you know, starting from resenting Link to putting her life on the line to save him. Like, that was real character development. And I do wish that the memories were more integrated into the story for that reason.
Mm-hmm. And like without them, you know, you interact with the champions, you do get like your ingrained story flashbacks every time you go to each region with each of the champions. But you get like so much more characterization with them, with the memories. Like you see them interact with each other and not just with Link. You get to see how they react to taking on their role and interacting with Princess Zelda and the Hyrule Kingdom. And without that, you understand that these were important people in Link's life once, but you're left looking through Link's perspective as somebody who has amnesia, as somebody who does not actually know these people, which works if you're trying to make Link that self-insert and make it so like, damn, I know that these people were important to me once, but I can't quite pin down why. It works from that gameplay level, but when you're the one playing the game and you want to know more about that story, it is crucial to understand that element of each of their characters. So,
I don't know.
yeah, I think I just think that the memories really should have been built into the game. Like even if it's something that you just unlock naturally just by progressing through a certain amount of the story, I think that would have been better than making them like out of the way locations that you have to visit. Because when you have a huge sprawling open world, like I said, you're not going to travel every square foot of it. You're not, unless you go looking for those memories, you're not going to uncover them. And I think you don't even get the memories until you get the camera, which in itself is optional. You don't need to get the camera. So,
So yeah, that is technically optional. However, that is listed as main quests.
It is
in the quest tab. So like, I don't see how people are ignoring that on the normal playthrough.
Right.
I would say, you know, you brought up amnesia. The thing is though, the story opportunity is right there. It's not just amnesia. It's 100-year gap. I think it's 100 years, right?
Yeah.
You're right. Point being, if you're trying to write a story, this is just taking a pure backseat from the gaming. If you're just trying to write a story, a guy who's forgotten what's happened after 100 years is one of the easiest stories to write in terms of angst, and they did not touch on it. Like, there's no discussion of his family. There's no discussion of the people he lost, just by sheer virtue of time, let alone the decimation that Ganon's forces have done after he was absent for that amount of time. It's not a hard story to write because it's such an easy opportunity, but there was pretty much no discussion of it beyond the 4 champions in Zelda.
I'm going to piggyback off that. I was going to save this for the very end, but I think now is the perfect time to bring it up. I'm going to put a pause on Breath of the Wild and start talking about another game briefly. I'm going to talk about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which, if you have not played, is a Dynasty Warriors-esque game set in the same world as Breath of the Wild. They lied. Nintendo lied to me. Nintendo lied to me when they marketed this game. When they gave out the commercials, when they did the Nintendo Direct and everything, they explained that Age of Calamity would essentially be a... To their defense, I guess, they never explicitly stated this, but everything they showed depicted this as being a prequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That it showed you what would happen, what happened in the 100 years prior. It literally is called the Age of Calamity. It's the time period where the calamity happened. And so I got this game and I was super excited. I was like, damn, Nintendo made a video game that in the end result you lose. Like, that's what we know happens. We know that the heroes lose because that's what Breath of the Wild set up. And you play this game and within like not even an hour, it becomes very clear that that's not what the game is. It is absolutely not a prequel. It is a side story, alternate dimension retelling of what could have happened. There's like time travel elements and like a whole bunch of other bullshit thrown in. And I feel like they dropped the ball so hard on that, because having a game, even if it's in a totally different style, that could have given you a more direct insight into what happened during the Calamity. Like, imagine actually playing as Link and having to watch the champions, some of your closest friends, die in front of you, sacrifice themselves for you and Princess Zelda. Like, imagine the power and the weight that moment would have. And instead the game is just like, nah, everyone's actually okay, and the events of Breath of the Wild never happened in this timeline. It's total bullshit, and completely turned me off from playing the rest of Age of Calamity. I think that they were very disingenuous with the marketing there. I've seen this thought repeated multiple times by other people on the internet as well. So, in case you haven't played it, either any of the three of you or any of our viewers who stumble across this video, don't go into it thinking that it's something more than it is. Okay. We're getting toward the end here. Not much left. I mentioned it a little bit before.
Part 2.
What'd you say?
I said sex appeal part 2.
Side on, but again. So.
Or it was counterpoint, or Bosa, but again.
I mentioned it a little bit before. This is the first Zelda game in the entire franchise. Hello again, Willow. This is the first Zelda game in the entire franchise to have voice acting beyond just like mumbling. And they do a really, really good job with it. Like, it really helps the characterization, again, in the scenes where it's present that are sometimes optional. But when it is there, it is super, super good to have. And I don't really care if Link doesn't talk. Like, he's kind of that self-insert protagonisty type. I'm kind of in the boat that it would feel weird if after 35 years he suddenly started talking to other people. But for the most part, I think that for the most part he doesn't really need to talk, and I think it works well in this world that other people are able to communicate, and Link has enough animation and direct focus on him that even though he's not talking to Zelda, even though he's not talking to the other champions, he gives the expressions that you need to know that, oh, Link is sad in this moment. Link is defensive or, joking in this moment or something like that. There are absolutely some times where it feels very, very weird that he is having a conversation with somebody and no words are coming from his mouth. But, it is what it is. You have a silent protagonist. I don't really expect them to go about changing that, and I don't really care if they do one way or the other.
And that's not exactly something that other Zelda games haven't run into, where they, like Skyward Sword, in like the first hour, you're talking to the headmaster about something that happened, and they just simulate Link talking by just like
he just gestures with his hand. Yeah,
he's
exactly.
Just gesturing his while other characters are at least making their character specific noises that generally correlate to an like emotion or like idea, and then they just have Link sort of just like have to gesture at people to simulate, okay, Link just had a full conversation. No, you don't get to hear it.
And I feel like at this point, like if they add Link voice acting in Breath of the Wild 2, it would feel really, really weird because he didn't do it at all in Breath of the Wild 1. So like, it is what it is. Like I said, just do what you want with it. It's fine. But the other characters really brought their all. Like, all of the voice actors deserve massive props for their roles. I can literally hear their voices in my mind right now. Anytime it's like, Rivali's Gale is now ready, or Daruk's protection is now ready to roll. Like all of that, like that's just like the basic repetitive lines, and then when they're actually delivering story and cutscenes and stuff, masterfully done. They picked a amazing cast. I will admit I have not heard the other language casts. I can only hope that they did just as good as the English cast did. I think we're in the end game here. So, just real quick, tacking on here, replayability. This game shockingly has a lot. I would not have expected Breath of the Wild to have as much replayability as it does, but it provides a good amount of, I guess as long as you're not going back into the world and doing 100% in your first playthrough, you can go back in and find plenty of new things, plenty of new stuff to explore. I personally, in my first playthrough, made sure to do all of the shrines and all of the dungeons. But aside from that, I didn't do all the side quests or anything like that. So there's still that sort of thing to do. You can do challenges with shield surfing and gliding and stuff like that. There's a good amount of stuff to do. A lot of it is going to be repetitive, like we talked about before. But there's a huge speedrunning community for this game. There are people mastering new ways to glitch the fuck out of, like I said, flying minecarts and bomb skipping and stuff like that. You can do quite a bit with this game, and you can set it up so that you challenge yourself in new ways. Once you beat the game, you can do it in master mode. I'll talk a little bit about my experiences with that. When I first played the game, admittedly, I was disappointed overall. I still enjoyed it. I still had plenty of fun with it, and I beat the game all the way through. But by the end of it, I was like, yeah, it didn't quite live up to expectations. Last year, I think at the very start of last year, so January 21, I replayed Breath of the Wild, and I did it on Master Mode, and I did it without a HUD. So without my mini-map on the screen, without any of that stuff popping up. And that genuinely changed my opinion on the game for the better. Forcing myself to actually get lost in the world, not know where the next destination would be. Obviously, I had a vague outline of where to go from there. But I think that really captured the essence of what Breath of the Wild was going for. Being absorbed into this world and forcing yourself to kind of get lost in it and just explore. Go somewhere, see what's there, find it, and then move on to the next thing. That was a really cool element of Master Mode for me. Not a huge fan of enemies becoming damage sponges and Link being a little straw man himself when getting attacked, but they gotta implement difficulty in some way, I suppose. So replayability is very good, and at the end of the day, the game is good. I will never look at Breath of the Wild and say that is a bad game. I think that for me, there was a distinct lack of payoff that I had from putting stuff in. I put in the time with this game. Like I said, I've played 145 hours of it over 3 distinct playthroughs. It didn't live up to the hype that I had going into it. And I think part of that is me setting expectations for myself far too high. But another part of that is just the numerous issues that I've listed throughout this, whether that be the forced amount of content of things to just collect, the weird weapon system that they have from time to time, the lack of enemy variability, all these different things kind of compound to make a game that would be great just be good, just be a solid good video game that I can easily recommend to other people. And that lack of payoff does hurt, but in another way, it also gives me hope and optimism, because at the end of the day, I see Breath of the Wild as groundwork. I see it as the pavement on which new Zelda games will be built upon and improve upon this structure. I think Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be a phenomenal game. I don't think that there's any way that they fuck it up. Like, it's rare that I can say that about a video game, that they could not fuck it up unless they release it in a cyberpunk state of glitchiness and fucked upness. I don't
Interesting
think...
in its own right.
Yeah, I don't think that they can fuck this game up, because they have such an amazing basis to go off of, and I just hope that they're able to address many of the issues that obviously I have voiced here today, but I don't think anything I've voiced here has been unique to me. I think I've heard all this from other people. I think while a majority would say that this game is near perfect, I think a good many people have also said it's really good, but we could also do this. We can improve the dungeons. We can add more variability. And I really hope Nintendo listens to that feedback. And Breath of the Wild 2 isn't just Breath of the Wild again, but is a legitimate successor and improvement upon everything that they established here. So ultimately, all I can say about Breath of the Wild is that I really do enjoy this game. I think it's great. I will, if anybody asks me, hey, should I play this game? Fuck yes. The answer is absolutely 1000% do play this game. But it is not perfect. And it is nowhere near the best game ever made. And I think that it's almost delusional to say that this game is flawless. And I hope that one day we can have a Zelda game that is like this, and everyone can kind of unite and say, yeah, you know, Breath of the Wild got us here, and this game that we have now, that is perfection.
Yay!
Thank you. Any final questions, comments, concerns, thoughts from anybody?
Wait. Can I make a comment?
Yes, absolutely.
My biggest complaint about Breath of the Wild is no dog petability.
Oh my god, I didn't even talk about that. Yes, that is a major crime. Dogs are prevalent in most settlements throughout this game. Can't pet them. Can't even. Hey, in Twilight Princess, you can pick them up at least. You can't pet them, but you can pick them up and cradle them like babies. Can't even do that in this game. Fucked up.
I would also like to add that you can feed them, but not out of your hand.
It's a crime.
You have to drop it on the floor. You have to put it on the ground. It's bullshit.
When can you pick up a dog in Twilight Princess?
I know in Orden Village, there's a dog in one of the houses that you can pick up. Like in the starting area of the game.
Aren't those cats? Isn't that
cats
running around?
There are cats too, but there's the one house that that the shield is in. There's a dog in there that you can pick up. He's got a really derpy face, but that's just GameCube graphics for you.
I just Googled Twilight Princess dog in Google Images. I've never seen this motherfucker before in my life. Interesting.
Anything else? I know you joined us late, Willow, so if you have anything to say about anything, feel free.
Yes, I hope Breath of the Wild 2 has increased dog petability. Thank you. Those are my only two comments.
Fair enough.
I try to enjoy games based on what they are and not what I think they could have been. I understand, like, this is like when it's different, like when the franchise like Breath or like when Legend of Zelda takes a massive shift like this.
Mm-hmm.
I understand it's much easier to like land on that. I try to enjoy, like, I do ultimately agree with you that it is a very good prototype for a new direction for Zelda. However, I tried to take that and not compare it to like what Zelda games were in the past.
Right. I used to very clearly say Breath of the Wild is a good game, but it's not a good Zelda game. I don't stick by that anymore, because I think it's just a new type of Zelda game, and I think that not necessarily being stuck in the past, but just kind of being used to the past kind of influenced my initial take on it. And after playing it again last year, and like I said, playing it in a way that allowed me to get absorbed into the world, I think I better understood that concept, that this is just kind of a new way of Zelda game. Just like how we went from 2D Zelda games to 3D Zelda games. Now we've gone from 3D Zelda games to open world Zelda games, and that's a really cool transition to have. And I got to see Breath of the Wild as more of what it is, instead of, like you said, comparing it to what came before. Cheers to Breath of the Wild 2 coming out in 2024, if we're lucky.
Very excited.
Sounding more and more like Overwatch 2, the more the more time passes.
It comes out.
It was supposed to come out this fall, but Breath of the Wild 1 was supposed to come out in 2015. So
yeah. And it got delayed to next year.
Knock on wood.
Anytime next year.
Yeah.
Colin, if you're about to wrap up, at the beginning you had us do
Same. I was just saying, same time frame as Silk Song.
That's another good one. You had us do 1-sentence reviews. Do you want us to do like maybe 2 or 3-sentence reviews at the end with a little bit more justification for what we said?
Yeah, if you feel like you have something to add, I'll save mine for the end. That'll be what this video goes out on.
Yeah, it should. I said at the beginning, it's an enjoyable and entertaining game that might be overrated. What I meant, having discussed it now, is love the setting and love the gameplay mechanics. I just think there are areas that it can improve on that make it fall short of the best game ever created. You guys are free to join in too.
Anybody else got a 2 to 3 sentence summary on their thoughts?
Amazing game with an amazing world and just enough justification for me to explore it.
I like that.
I do ultimately agree with the side story stuff. There can be more reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would be very open to more reason. But as it stands, I have enough reason.
What's your final thought, Caroline?
My final thought is that I don't agree with a lot of what was said tonight, but that's okay. Not necessarily just you, Colin, just like, I don't know. There were like some takes I didn't like agree with, but it's all personal preference. That's the whole point of this chat.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah. I think Breath of the Wild is a great game, and I think that there is definitely I think there's definitely value in critiquing different components of things. I just don't usually, I don't know. I think when critiques have what something was missing rather than what was wrong with it is when I get to a place where I'm like, well, there's not infinite time and money. You know what I mean? Like, I think that a lot of your ideas were like, yes, this would be nice, but I understand why it didn't happen.
Right. And I'm really interested if that's like just like solely personal preference, or if that comes from like your background of not having played the other Zelda games compared to like mine and Jeff's having played other Zelda games, for instance.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people are going to have different opinions on this, and I highly encourage them, because I know that this game means a lot to a lot of different people, and I would never like stomp on it to say like everything I said here tonight is fact, and if you disagree, you're fucking wrong, or anything like that. Yeah, this game has so much that you could go into. We've been here for hours. I feel like I barely scratched the surface of everything I wanted to say, but at the same time, I'm like, I think I've conveyed enough how I feel about this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In addition, I would say, for me, the standard that I compare it to, just because this is what I was told walking in, is, like I said, the best game ever. If you ask me if it's in my top 10, absolutely. And I do want to end on just a positive note for it, that it is a fantastic game, especially considering what it came from, like how drastically different it is from every other Zelda game. And I still think it's one of the reasons the Switch became as popular as it did is largely because it had a game like Breath of the Wild. And, in a review, I think fundamentally we'll always have a bit of negative language or connotation to what we talk about. But just because the conversation naturally tends towards the more interesting, what's it lacking, or what could the game have done. But it really is a fantastic game that should, I think, without arguing, belong in people's top 10s, top 15s, top 5s, depending on what games you played. And I would not be mad at it. So I'm not trying to take away what it does well. Just kind of the nature of how a drunk review goes.
Yeah. I mean, that's why.
Colin, now that you said, like, does my background maybe have something to do with our differences?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought to myself, I think so, but in another way as well, because I think maybe I might be, and like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said that you don't play many open world games. I think I would also be looking at it through the lens of like playing a ton of open world games, and like, yeah,
I play a fair bit of open world games. I'm not the biggest fan of them. I tend to play them for like extended periods of time and like fall off partway. Like I've never beaten Skyrim. To this day, have not ever beaten Skyrim. I've played it like 5 different times. Because at a certain point I just kind of like get distracted by something else, or the game just loses it for me when I'm not like focused as much. Honestly, like for me personally, it's almost a testament to how good this game is that I have beaten it multiple times, considering my history with open world games. That's a great point to make as well. So Willow, I would ask you again, but I feel like you're probably just going to say more things about dog pet ability. But if you want to do a 2 to 3 sentence summary, you're free to.
Yeah, I enjoy this game. I liked the level of story in it. And I liked the horses. And I wish that you could pet the dogs. My only little complaint. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, thanks for sticking through this. What hour are we at? 3.5 hour review of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. In short, this is not the best game ever made for me. And I know many people are going to play this game and see it as that. And I'm just going to disagree with you and say I get it, because this game has so much to offer and it's so impressive with what they made with the hardware they had at the time that they made it. This game is phenomenal. It has a lot of things that bug me as somebody who is a devout fan of the Legend of Zelda franchise and all the games that came before this. And more than anything, despite the flaws I see in it, despite the the errors that I would want improved personally. More than anything, I see room to grow, and that excites me beyond belief. And so I'm very excited for the next entry in one of the most beloved series for me. And Breath of the Wild, you done good by me. Highly recommend playing it to anybody out there.